Sup, guys? So, back with you yet again. I was going to do it last night, but I decided to not do that. It took a while to handicap the college basketball slate, man. I was going to get back to you after the NFL video. Thanks for all of you who hung out in the NFL video last night, in the NFL chat. Talked about the wild card playoffs there. If you want my detailed analysis on all the NFL wildcard games, go check that out. I'm not going to rehash it in this video because we got a lot to cover with a huge college basketball slate. We got NHL is always a big slate on Saturday, and we got I think Bruins are not even playing today. I don't even know. And then I should know because I just broke down every game. And then the NBA has a few games as well. You can go see my rant last night as well at the top of that top of the NFL video that I did last night, ranting about especially that college football game, Texas non-cover there, which should have absolutely been a cover. Tim, what's up, man? What was gay? The NFL video? Oh, you passed out? Well, it was late at night. Oh, all right. Pound coffee like I do, man. I'm drinking espresso. I'm drinking coffee basically 24/7. I got my water here this morning. I already had coffee this morning. I basically didn't sleep, so I did the NFL video. That was like midnight to 1:30. Then I broke down. It took me until like almost 4 a.m. to break down college basketball, and then I passed out at that point, and I only slept for like 4 hours. Got up, and I'm like, oh, man, I need coffee, and then I got to get ready for this video here. What a life this is. I should be betting more money on this if I'm winning. Let's get back to the winning ways, man. I like my college basketball plays here. I'm going to talk a lot about some of these college basketball games, and of course, we know what this is. This is a college basketball Saturday, and we're in the thick of conference play now, so we got a lot going on here. I don't know if I want to talk about every single one of these games, but there are a lot of games that are maybe of note. Lots of big matchups. I'll definitely talk about all the ranked matchups at the very least. Maybe not the ones that are these kind of ugly double-digit matchups here. Creighton and Butler actually looks like an interesting Big East game. Creighton, they're coming off a game where they played Marquette pretty close on the road. Now it's a second straight road game. So it looks like kind of a difficult spot for Creighton to me as they've gone, up to Milwaukee. They're kind of doing the Midwest thing, although it's not really that far from Omaha. It's not like they're going out to the eastern section of the Big East here, but still, when you go to Marquette and you play them to within 8 points, that's kind of a difficult spot to follow that up when you come off of a game like that. So I would lean to Butler in this game because of that. Butler, they're coming off a really horrendous-looking loss to Providence, and that was on the road, losing by almost 20 points. So now they're coming back home. It looks like a bounce-back spot to me for Butler. Creighton, they're the better team, and they are up from 1.5 to 2.5 with juice, so it's going to be probably a 3. You might be able to get 3 on Butler. 68% of the tickets and 57% of the cash on Creighton, so Creighton is public. I mean, people remember Creighton being good the last few years. They're still pretty good this year, but they're a little bit down from those years. I don't think they're they're not going to be an Elite Eight tournament team this year. Let's just put it that way. Butler is definitely not very good right now. They're still kind of in a downswing, but this is the type of game. It's a spot where I think Butler does show up, and they do play a good game in this one. So that is my lean in that game. Number 2, Auburn is at South Carolina, which a little bit of an interesting spot here just because, Auburn's continuing to roll, and they just went into Texas. Texas is a fairly good team, man. That's not an easy spot to be in with Auburn. They did not play many road games. Looks like they only had one road game prior to that, which they lost at Duke. Very close. They played well. They beat Texas. Again, not an easy game, really, even though Auburn, I think, was a double-digit favorite there. Now they got a second straight road game coming off what is a pretty big win, even though it wasn't a ranked matchup, with a ranked Mississippi State team up next. Somewhat of a difficult spot, in my opinion, for Auburn there. But South Carolina, I would think they're coming off a difficult spot because they just played Alabama, and I thought they were going to do a little bit better against Alabama than they did. I thought they were going to be able to slow the game down more than they did, but they wound up losing by 20. So South Carolina may still be kind of the lead in this one, I guess. I think Auburn might be in a little bit of a more difficult spot, and South Carolina not traveling. They are coming up facing a tough opponent, but they did lose pretty badly. But still, you have to play Alabama, and they run up and down the court on you, and then you have to play Auburn right after that. Still not really very easy, so obviously I'm going to pass on that game. Auburn's a 16.5-point favorite, up from 16. Obviously, they're going to be public. I mean, they're one of the best teams in the country, if not the best. 62% of the tickets and only 60% of the cash. We got San Diego State, New Mexico. Pretty good matchup coming up at 1 p.m. I don't even know when the first matchup that I have even takes place. I don't have any noon games here. A lot of times I will jump in and have a noon game. I do not. And I have no nooners in this one, even though I am a nooner. I don't have nooners today, actually, folks. I have healed. San Diego State at New Mexico. I mean, playing at New Mexico is never an easy spot for any of these teams. And San Diego State did just hold the Air Force to 38 points. I know Air Force isn't good, but that's just kind of a ridiculous result. I mean, San Diego State, both teams are going to be focused on this game, but I see it being a little bit difficult for San Diego State to have to go into the pit. New Mexico undefeated in conference right now. Basically, their best win, though, is against Nevada in conference, I think, so far. So not one of the, that is one of the better teams, not the best team. So they are having to step up in class here to face San Diego State, who's probably one of the top couple of teams in this conference. It's probably Utah State, New Mexico, and Utah State, New Mexico, and San Diego State, probably the top three, and then maybe Boise. Those are the top four for sure, but New Mexico hasn't faced any of them yet. But New Mexico is going to be a favorite in this one. They are at home. Let me see, where are they at? They're up from Pick'em to 3.5, so this line has really moved in the direction of New Mexico. Probably too far, though. 80% of the tickets and 96% of the cash. So the public actually kind of likes New Mexico as well here, as their record is better than San Diego State's is right now. They're undefeated in conference, like I said. The cash seems to not be disagreeing with it, but I think when you have public and pro agreement, which you might have in this game, it looks like the line's gone a little bit too far, and I think it gets to a point where if this line's around like 4, there might be some line value in looking the other way and taking San Diego State in a game where the situation isn't really horrible one way or the other. So I don't know, man. I don't know what else to say about that, really. I forgot to mention St. Bonaventure, by the way, coming off a loss that broke like a long win streak. They were a one-loss team, with their only loss being to Utah State, but they hadn't really faced a lot of great opponents, and then they got caught, and they lost at St. Louis. St. Louis was the favorite there. St. Louis is a pretty good team. They were flying under the radar, but now that they're off to a 3-0 start in the A-10, and they just beat St. Bonaventure, they're maybe not under the radar anymore, but that could be a type of loss for St. Bonaventure that kind of sends them into a hangover spot coming out of that, because that was a big game. They played close. They lost. It broke a winning streak for them. Could be a type of like spot where you lose the game twice type of thing. They got to play LaSalle. LaSalle maybe not quite as bad as their record would indicate, and they're coming off a not very great looking loss really to Loyola Chicago, losing by double digits. So they might be ready to show up in this game and play. So I would not want to be on the Bonaventure side in this one, looking for a bounce back here. Bonaventure definitely public, 12.5 with a little bit of juice now, up on the 12.5. 83% of tickets, 74% of the cash. So slight lean to taking the points with LaSalle in that one. Whew, man, this is there's so much going on. All right, my first play is right here. Iowa State and Texas Tech. Number 3, Iowa State on the road at Texas Tech. You want to take a guess what my play is going to be in this one? Andre, are the Steelers live today? I don't think so. I mean, I think Baltimore's probably going to win by double digits in that game. You can watch my breakdown of that last night. I think we've seen a turning point, man, where Baltimore is actually a significantly better team than Pittsburgh at this point. I don't know. The Steelers look like they're about to fizzle out to me, so I would not want to take the points with the Steelers, even though I know this is a big rivalry. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if they do wind up coming in with that number. But as far as, like, do I think that they're live to, like, win outright? I definitely do not. I think Baltimore is going to win that game. Baltimore is a legit, like, contender. I would be pretty shocked if Baltimore didn't win the game. I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't win by 10 points, though. Sorry, Tim, but this is the college basketball show, basically, man. And this is Saturday morning. NFL was last night. Saturday morning, there's college basketball, and there's going to be some hockey and then a little bit of NBA. If it's Steelers versus Lions, yeah, that's not going to happen. Steelers just not good enough, man. I'm sorry. I mean, Russell Wilson's too old. They've overperformed a little bit, although then again, like I said last night, that 4-game loss streak that they had, it was kind of a bad schedule for them, but they played a lot of really difficult opponents all in quick succession. So I don't think they're as bad as they looked maybe in those 4 games, but I also don't think they're great either. Yeah, I mean, that would be that would be like a blue collar Super Bowl matchup, right, between the two Rust Belt teams there. I mean, I wouldn't hate it. I don't think it's going to happen, though, obviously. All right, let's get to this play. Yeah, obviously, what I was alluding to. This play is on Texas Tech, minus 1.5. I think the line might be up a little bit on Texas Tech now. Let me see here. Hopefully, you can still get a decent number on this. It is up from Pick'em to 2.5. Now, this is what I get, man, because I made the bets last night for the most part. 60% of the tickets, 78% of the cash. So Texas Tech, I doubt that they're actually going to be public. I mean, look at this. What public bettor is going to see, number 3 Iowa State against Texas Tech, and Iowa State's getting points? What public bettor is going to lay the points with Texas Tech when you see something like this? This is one of those home favorite situations where it's an unranked home favorite against a ranked road opponent. And yes, I think Iowa State is very good. I think they are one of the best teams in the country. I think they are elite, but I don't think this is a great spot for Iowa State, and I think this is a trap line here. The odds makers are basically begging you to take Iowa State, and Iowa State's basically done nothing wrong. I mean, their only loss is a 2-point loss to Auburn. Yes, I think Iowa State is legit, but I mean, their schedule, yeah, I mean, Auburn, that's a big game, and then Marquette, also a big game. Since then, I mean, I don't know, their biggest battle test so far in the Big 12 is Baylor. Baylor's pretty good, but still, I don't know, man. Iowa State, they beat Baylor, crushed them, actually, by almost 20. Then they beat Utah and absolutely embarrassed Utah, 82-59. Utah is definitely not very good this year, I would say. Now Iowa State has to go on the road, and going on the road's never that easy. I mean, they played a couple of road games. They beat Iowa and Colorado, but Colorado's not great at all, and they only won that game by 10. Colorado pushed that game for me, and Iowa, although they're good, I mean, Iowa State is certainly better. I mean, Iowa State, yeah, they're actually legitimately like a top 5 team in my opinion, but they're coming off almost a 30-point blowout win, having to go on the road to Texas Tech, and up next in 4 days, they got Kansas. And if you're one of the top teams in the Big 12, you know who the other opponents are, who are your contenders, really. Your biggest foes to win the Big 12 are Houston and Kansas at this point, man, and maybe Baylor. So, I mean, that's a huge look-ahead spot to Kansas, man. Any way you look at it, I think it is possible Iowa State has somewhat of an overlook spot here at Texas Tech, even though Texas Tech is good. I mean, Texas Tech, they've had a couple of losses in here as well, but 1-point loss to St. Joe's, 5-point loss to Texas A&M, and lost by 4 to UCF. I mean, that loss to UCF doesn't look that great, but UCF is at least a competitive team right now. None of these losses are really that bad. Although, of course, Texas Tech doesn't have a huge win yet. They don't have a statement win. But they did go out on the road. They also annihilated Utah on the road by almost 30 points as well. And then they're coming off a win at BYU, and now they're coming home from going out into elevation out there. I mean, into Utah and BYU. And Utah's a newcomer to the Big 12. I think BYU might have been a newcomer last year. So those not easy spots to go out there for Texas Tech. So that shows me something. Texas Tech went out into those environments and still won both of those games. And now they get Iowa State. This is a big game, man. I mean, this is the biggest game on tap for a little while here. So Texas Tech, I would expect they're going to show up in this game. Huge home game here for Texas Tech. They're only 2-1 in conference right now. They do not have a conference home win yet either, as they lost their conference home opener to UCF. So I think that might be a little bit even more of a motivator here. So the spot is better for Texas Tech, in my opinion, as well. The market looks like it's on Texas Tech. It looks way too easy to take Iowa State in this one. I will fade that sentiment and take Texas Tech, even though I know Iowa State, they're one of the only teams that KenPom has top 10 in both defense and offense. Iowa State does play a little bit faster tempo than we're used to. Remember last year, Iowa State was way more defense than offense. They're now really good on both sides of the ball, but Iowa State, Tempo-wise, they're in like the top third of tempo, and Texas Tech is going to want to slow it down, and Texas Tech may very well be able to do that. Texas Tech, their offense is good enough that they or efficient enough, at least, that they can compete with Iowa State. It's just Texas Tech's defense isn't very good, but Ken Baum also has Texas Tech at 328th in luck, even though he has them at a very low strength of schedule right now as well. That luck factor is telling you that Texas Tech is underperforming right now. So Texas Tech could be in a very competitive matchup here with Iowa State here. Texas Tech, Ken Baum only has them at 18th in the country, so that's not bad at all, with Iowa State at 4. So looking like a competitive matchup here on the road. Texas Tech can absolutely do this, and if Texas Tech slows the pace way down again, like I say, it's always easier when you're the lesser team to slow the pace down, especially when you're at home. Texas Tech may very well be able to do that, and if they do that, that's going to kind of throw Iowa State out of the type of game they actually want to play this year. So that makes me look to Texas Tech as well with that pacing collision. So Texas Tech is the first play there for me. Up next, UConn is at Georgetown, and this line does make it look like it's too easy to lay the points with UConn, but I don't know, man. I mean, UConn is off a tough battle against Villanova. I mean, that's a game where both teams are going to play slow, kind of grind the game, get pretty physical. Villanova, huge win for Villanova, which, by the way, I'm going to talk about that later in the show as they play tonight. Yeah, hint, hint. You probably know where I'm going with that if you know me. UConn is playing a second straight road game here. They'll go to Georgetown. Georgetown's been playing well enough to start the season, though they're having what looks like an actual resurgence for this Georgetown program. We'll see once they get really going in Big East play how well they actually really do, but that might actually mean that UConn wouldn't overlook Georgetown, but that game against Villanova was big, man. I mean, that was a big game, close game, hard-fought battle, and they still may have a tendency to maybe look ahead to Creighton a little bit here, maybe not take Georgetown totally seriously. Georgetown, on the other hand, though, looks good that they played pretty competitively against Marquette. They went on the road, and they only lost by 8 to Marquette. So that tells you that this Georgetown team may actually be pretty competitive this year, which we've seen other signs of that, too, where they smashed Creighton. They lost only by 13 on the road to West Virginia. That's not that bad. The Notre Dame loss is pretty bad, but other than that, their resume actually looks pretty good so far, and you know that they're going to step up with the returning champs coming into their house in Georgetown, having basically been completely absent and missing from the college basketball landscape for a long time. So I might slightly still lean to Georgetown here, but the market does look like the money's coming in on UConn. This is not a play for me, obviously. UConn up from 3.5 to 4.5 with juice. 76% of the tickets, 82% of the cash on the UConn side. So the money looks like it is slightly coming in on the side of UConn, but I'm not sure that the spot really dictates that, so I don't know. Next up will be another play for me, though, and that's another what I think is a trap line, trap spot. Cincinnati +1 is going to be a play for me as well. This one, I don't know if I like it as much as the Texas Tech one, but it is a very similar spot to the Texas Tech one where I mentioned Iowa State has a look ahead to Kansas. So what else does that mean? Yeah, that means Kansas probably has a look ahead to Iowa State, and maybe it's an even bigger look ahead for Kansas because we know Iowa State's atop the Big 12 right now. They're a one-loss team, and they're ranked 3rd in the country. Kansas probably is going to have something to say about that, even though I do think Iowa State is indeed better than Kansas is. Kansas, probably right around like the 10th best team in the country, maybe. I don't know. I forget where Ken Baum has them, but they're ranked 11th right now. Kansas, they're coming off a couple of blowout wins after they had that bad loss to West Virginia at home. I actually played Kansas coming off that, even though they were going to kind of an unfamiliar road venue in UCF, where they did lose last year, though. So I think that helped them focus in that game. They blasted UCF. It was one of the biggest blowout wins I've ever had on that game. UCF was also coming off, I believe, upsetting Texas Tech, which is the game I just mentioned a little while ago. So that was a good spot to play Kansas, in my opinion. Then they came off of that, came back home, and they blasted Arizona State as well. So they're coming off a 20-point win. They're going to Cincinnati. I mean, this is a spot where Kansas, I mean, it's not a very familiar spot for them either, because I know Kansas is very battle-tested, though. Kansas had a very difficult schedule. There's no way around that. But Kansas, I mean, this just seems like a weird spot to me. For Cincinnati's kind of new to the Big 12. Kansas, did they play Cincinnati on the road last year or only at home? I know they lost them in the tournament, though. Yeah, so Kansas actually, I don't even think they played in this venue. So it's an unfamiliar venue to them, whereas that UCF one, they at least went there last year and lost. So they were at least more familiar with that travel spot. They're not used to going to Cincinnati here, man. Even though I know, is Kansas going to want revenge here because Cincinnati knocked them out of the Big 12 tournament last year? I don't know, because that didn't end Kansas' season. I played Cincinnati in that game, actually. I thought it was a good spot, getting a lot of points. I think it was like double-digit underdog on Cincinnati there. And Cincinnati, or no, it wasn't. Never mind. It was down, because Kansas had so many injuries. The line crashed. Like, Dickinson was out. Their top two players are out. Never mind. So I remember the line, totally crashed. But it was a situation where it looked too easy to play Kansas. So I played Cincinnati in that game, but I don't know if Kansas is really going to care that much about revenge against Cincinnati because of a Big 12 exit when some of Kansas's players were injured in that game. I don't know, man. I don't really think so. I mean, Kansas, they still made the tournament, so the team that really ended Kansas' season last year was Gonzaga, so that might be a bit of a bigger revenge spot there. And Kansas, like I said, I think they may be feeling a bit high on themselves right now after a couple of blowout wins where you're going to tend to feel a little bit overconfident when you smash teams like that. You're going to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati likes to grind you, man, and play. They really like to play physical at home, especially. And Cincinnati was a team that was ranked not that long ago, and they fell out of the rankings. This is not a bad Cincinnati team with losses on the road to Villanova in a close game. They did lose at Kansas State, which I thought was a difficult spot, so I'm not going to really knock them for that. I won on that one. And then Arizona is definitely better than we think they are right now. Arizona has faced a really difficult schedule so far, so I thought Arizona was going to win that game. And indeed, they did. Arizona was actually a road favorite, I think, in that game. Or maybe they were a really slight underdog. No, they were a slight underdog. And Cincinnati was still ranked. I think that knocked them from the rankings. Then Cincinnati went on the road and they lost to Baylor. I mean, I'm not going to knock them for losing to Baylor either. But now Cincinnati's on a 3-game loss streak, and Kansas looks like they're beating everybody. So no public bettor is going to want to come in and play Cincinnati in this game, right? But I do, and when Cincinnati's coming off a 20-point loss like this, you know it's got to be a refocus spot for Cincinnati here. That's what I think. I think they're going to show up for this game, be focused. In Kansas, they're down from 2-1 on the line here. 50% of the tickets looking like they're evenly split. I think that's probably low as well. I think you're probably going to see the public is definitely got to be on the Kansas side in this one, but 60% of the money on Cincinnati. So I'm liking the market reads on my plays here. Looks like the money is coming in on the Cincinnati side, and that is the way that I will play this game. And like I was alluding to, Kansas, they like to play a bit faster, similar to what I just said about Iowa State. They're both similar in tempo, actually, up in the top, in the top 120 in tempo, whereas Cincinnati is not. Cincinnati's down at 273, so actually very similar pacing matchup. This is a very similar game to that other game I just talked about. Cincinnati's actually very close to where Texas Tech is in pace, so Cincinnati's going to want to slow this game way down. Cincinnati has a really good defense at least, so this is two good defenses here as well. So this could be a lower scoring physical game where it just turns into it's anybody's game. Kansas can definitely outscore Cincinnati, but in a game, like I said, where Cincinnati's probably going to try to slow the pace way down, you got to look to the Cincinnati side, in my opinion, here. Ken Baum also has both of these teams really low in the luck index, too, so he has both teams underperforming so far. He's got Kansas up at 9th in the country, and Cincinnati at, where's Cincinnati at? 33rd, so not great, but still, I mean, Cincinnati, I believe they're going to be competitive in this game, and I'm saying, I think they will win this game, in my opinion. So give me those two. What do we got up next here for college basketball? So much college basketball to pay attention to, man. Oh, man, it's wild. All right. I was going to say UNC Asheville. I'll talk about these two games real quick. UNC Asheville just played against Longwood, and Longwood beat them. Which was a game where UNC Asheville was coming off a game where they beat High Point, which High Point is probably the best team in the Big South for the second straight year, even though I know Longwood wound up winning the conference last year. UNC Asheville actually had revenge against Longwood for that conference tournament, coming off that High Point game, and they still lost to Longwood. So now they're coming off two really big games, two step-up games, and having to face a second straight road game now at Presbyterian. So I would look to the Presbyterian side in that one if I was going to play that game. And Presbyterian is sitting at a pick'em, which people are going to look at these teams' records and think it looks kind of weird. Like, how is an 8-10 team a pick'em? Basically, it's just pick the winner against a 10-6 team. We know Asheville's the better team, but Presbyterian isn't that much worse than they are this year. So that's the way that I look, especially in that particular spot. And then on the other side of that, I almost wanted to play Winthrop because Longwood, that's a big win they're coming off of, man. And they bounced back from playing pretty bad against Charleston Southern, who's one of the worst teams in this conference. And they lost to Presbyterian in the game before that. So Presbyterian did beat Longwood, so they can beat some of these better teams in the conference. Longwood hadn't played well for 2 games, and they stepped it up, and they had a nice game against UNC Asheville. They could be in a letdown coming off of that, having to go to Winthrop, and they have High Point up next. And High Point, we know, is atop the conference right now. They're the team that's sitting above Longwood right now. Winthrop is pretty good, though. I mean, they're at 11-7, but it's still a spot where maybe Longwood would overlook Winthrop. Winthrop's coming off losing to Gardner-Webb, which isn't great, and they're coming off an ugly loss to Radford as well. Winthrop trying to get a conference win here, man. They're 1-0 in the conference at home, at least, though. Being USC upstate, South Carolina upstate, they're not a very good team at all. But Winthrop, their 2 losses on the road at Radford and Gardner-Webb. I mean, those are okay teams in the conference. But, yeah, Winthrop looks like the right spot in this one. They're sitting at a 3-point favorite. It looks like it's dropped a little bit, but that is the way that I would look in that one. That was close to actually being a play for me in that one. And then South Florida, I would maybe look to fade them just because they pulled off an upset at Wichita State, which is a pretty big upset of probably around 8-9 points. And they do have UAB up next, who is a pretty good team in the American Athletic Conference as well. So it's possible they overlook Tulane, who's just, I mean, Tulane has not really been a basketball program for as long as I can remember. Tulane up from 3 to 3.5 with 80% of the cash on them, 50% of the tickets evenly split. So the public is going to look at this and think taking the points with South Florida makes sense. I think it looks pretty bizarre that Tulane, the team with the worst record, is laying points against them, but that is the spot, and I think South Florida is not that much better than Tulane. South Florida was way overperforming last year, where it looked like they had chances to even win that conference last year. They were a total fraud last year, as I kept saying, which no offense to them, but it's just the way that it is. They weren't as good as they were performing, so that's the way that I break that down. It's the way I look at that one. Let me see. I hope I didn't skip a game here, although if I did, I'll go back to it. I don't think I did. The next game up is one of my plays in this Ivy League. The Ivy League is finally starting. I think they're the last conference to actually start conference play. Most of these teams don't have a game in conference yet. I'm going to play Cornell at a pick'em price in this one. This is another one that looks very misleading against Columbia. I think Columbia is, talk about fraudulent. I mean, this is a nice segue here. I mean, I don't want to use words that are that harsh, but I think Columbia is not as good as they look. Cornell flipped from a +1 dog up to now teetering on being a favorite. I saw Pick'em and -1 out there. I mean, either way, picking them to just win the game, that's fine. Or like a money line that's around a Pick'em price. Either way, I like it. I mean, looking at this, look at their records. Cornell 8-5. Columbia is at home at 11-2. So how the hell are you looking at a line that's pick the winner, basically? Well, the odds makers are telling you Cornell is the better team. I agree with this. I think Columbia has faced a soft schedule so far. I mean, Cornell, they got to win against Samford. I mean, Samford is a pretty good team, man. Like I said, LaSalle is probably not as bad as they look. Cornell lost to Syracuse by 10. I mean, that's an ACC team, so whatever. Lost to Robert Morris. Doesn't look like they do have some kind of ugly losses in here to Siena, Illinois State, but they did beat Cal on the road. So kind of getting a Jekyll and Hyde situation with Cornell, but I'm hoping that we get Dr. Jekyll in this one. Or do we want Mr. Hyde? I don't know. Do we want the good or the evil Cornell here? I don't know. Which one is going to allow me to win this game? I don't know, but the way this spot sets up, I actually like the scheduling spot for Cornell here, because Cornell hadn't played since before the new year, and they'd lost 2 games going into the break. They came out of the break, and they broke that losing streak by beating a Division II team or whatever in Penn State. I don't even, how do you pronounce the name of that county? I don't even know. Schuykill? I have no idea. Schuylkill? Somebody can correct me on my Pennsylvania pronunciations. I only know how to pronounce Boston, Massachusetts town names and shit, kid. Schuylkill? Maybe that's what it is. Schuylkill. Something like that. Schuylkill. All right, whatever. Cornell beat them. They did put up a huge point total, 123, but the reason I don't think this is bad is because that was like a tune-up type of game that broke their loss streak, and that means they played 6 days ago. So they're used to playing again after coming out of that break. You do not want to go into an extended break and go into it on a win streak. That's what I will say. So that win helps them break that loss streak. It helps them get used to playing again. So I think that's all good. And now they are starting a road trip here, but I think they're going to be focused on Columbia, man, because it's like, who the hell is Columbia to be 11-2 right now? And looking at Columbia, yeah, look at their schedule. They haven't played anybody. I mean, they lost to Albany. I mean, that's not a great loss. And they got annihilated by Rutgers, which I know that's a Big Ten team, but I don't think Rutgers is very good, man. And Columbia got absolutely outclassed completely. This Columbia team, yeah, they have that one win against Villanova that's starting to look like way more of an outlier than anything else. I don't know what that was, but good win for Columbia. But Villanova maybe just overlooked them, didn't take them seriously at all. Who knows? Villanova hadn't gotten in rhythm yet. I don't see anything that leads me to believe that Columbia is as good as their record would indicate. They do have Yale up next, and I don't know if Yale is going to draw their attention a little bit more than Cornell is, just because Yale won this conference last year, and Cornell's kind of been a lesser team for a little while. Who knows? But the other thing that I don't like about Columbia is look at their schedule here. Talking about breaks, that Rutgers game was back on December 30th, and I know they lost, so they went into this long break on a losing note, but they haven't played for, 12, 13 days, whatever it is. So they haven't played for almost 2 weeks. So that's not good, man. I don't like when teams have this extended time off. I mean, you could see a little bit of rust, even though, yeah, you might say they're going to bounce back from that bad loss to Rutgers. But then again, that was a big step-up game for them going to face a Big Ten team, and they got plastered. So that might be a situation where that game kind of sends them crashing down to earth and sends them spiraling, and they're kind of like thinking about that and questioning themselves throughout this entire break. So I don't like that. I like that Cornell just got a game out of the way under their belt 5 days ago and has momentum coming into this, whereas Columbia, you don't know what they're going to be like coming into this game after that long break. So you might see them start turning into a team that's not as good as what we think they are. Ken Baum has Columbia. Where does he have them? He has them way down at 171st, so not really looking like an 11-2 team. He's got them at 13th in luck in the entire country and 361st in strength of schedule, which is like basically fifth weakest schedule strength in the entire country. He's got Columbia pretty bad defensively, although they can score, which is kind of similar to Cornell, actually. But he's got Cornell as the better team up at 151st. He does have Cornell as a way faster tempo, though, so Columbia will probably try to slow the pace down a bit, but I don't know if they're going to succeed in doing so. I mean, Columbia's not that slow, really. They play like a mid-tempo game, so I don't think it's going to really throw Cornell out of their element. He's got Cornell at 294th in luck, whereas Columbia's 13th, like I said, so a huge luck disparity where he's telling you that Cornell is way underperformed so far. Columbia's way overperformed. He actually has Cornell as the better team actually on both offense and defense, not by a whole lot, but on both sides of the ball. And he's got Cornell with not a strong strength of schedule, but 273rd is at least stronger. So he's got Cornell as the better all-around team. I don't disagree with him. I think it's a misleading line there. Odds makers are telling you who the better team actually is here. The pick is Cornell in that one. That's a play. It is kind of a trap line there. So give me Cornell in that one. We're only in the 2 p.m. afternoon slate, man. I don't want to go over every single one of these games, but Ball State, I would look to fade Ball State in MAC action here as they came off upsetting Kent State on the road, which is a huge upset. I don't know how big, but 10.5. I thought it was actually probably bigger than that. And then they played tough again against Miami, Ohio, taking them pretty deep into that game, only losing by 8 against, those are a couple of the top 2 teams in the MAC, and now they're coming off that, and they have Ohio and Toledo up next, who are the other top 2 teams in the MAC. So this is definitely a down spot for Ball State here. So I would look to take the points with Bowling Green in this one. And Bowling Green did just beat Western Michigan. So, I mean, coming off a tough game against Akron, where they played pretty well. Akron's also a pretty good team in this conference. It is a second straight road game, though, for Bowling Green. So, I don't know. And that was an upset. They're not a very good team. So, they did pull off an upset in that last one. But I think the spot is still worse for Ball State coming off that big upset. Ball State up from 4.5 to 5. 67% of tickets on them, but it looks like 74% of the cash. Market agreement with me on taking the points with Bowling Green. That's the way that I would look in that game. Syracuse and Boston College is a little bit interesting. My Boston College Eagles. BC has the better looking record. Syracuse did just beat Georgia Tech, though, by 7, and BC just got annihilated, I'm pretty sure, by the same Georgia Tech team. So they both had the same opponent in their last game, and completely different results, although BC went on the road. Syracuse had Georgia Tech at home, but still, I think the public might come in and look at this and think, well, BC isn't that good, even though the record's a little bit better. Syracuse is the name that I know. Syracuse just beat Georgia Tech, who just killed BC, and you're basically just asking me to pick the winner here, so give me Syracuse, right? I'm not so sure about that. I think Boston College would probably be the way to look in this game. They flipped from +1 to a slight favorite going through the pick'em price here. And I think it's all basically just because that you can't base everything off of one result, man. One common opponent that both of these teams just played, and Boston College had the way worse result out of the two. So Boston College may be the right side there. Bradley is coming off a tough loss to Drake, man. And Bradley was kind of rolling, and then they ran into Drake as basically the top two teams in the Missouri Valley. That's a big game, man. That's a tough loss to take for Bradley. So that's the type of game that could hang them over going into Illinois-Chicago. Even though Illinois-Chicago's been playing surprisingly well so far this year. Illinois-Chicago, they're coming off beating Missouri State, who's been pretty bad this year, and they're coming back home for this game. Illinois-Chicago actually beat Drake already. So I don't know if people are going to look at that and think, oh, well, Illinois-Chicago beat Drake, who beat Bradley, and do that like transitive thing. So that means Illinois-Chicago should win this game. But because Bradley's in a pretty tough spot, I think coming off that game against Drake, I still might look to take the points with UIC in this one. Not a play for me. And the market looks like the money is still coming in on Bradley, up from 2.5 to 3 with juice. 75% of tickets, 90% of the cash on Bradley. And maybe, I'm assuming it's probably because the metrics, like the numbers guys are coming in, and it's probably the metrics are probably telling them that UIC is overperforming this year because they seemingly have come from out of nowhere. So UIC may not actually be totally legit, whereas Bradley is. Bradley is definitely one of the better teams, one of the best teams in that conference. There's UIC kind of questionable, but the situation doesn't look that great for Bradley. So a little bit of a conflict there as far as how to look at that game. Obviously not a play for me. Kennesaw at Western Kentucky. Kennesaw just lost a close game on the road at Middle Tennessee, and Kennesaw, I'm assuming, was a pretty big underdog in that one. Middle Tennessee is a legit team in the Conference USA here, and now they're facing Western Kentucky, who's also a pretty difficult team and kind of a little bit under the radar maybe right now because they're 1-2 to start conference play. But this is a tough spot for Kennesaw, coming off playing Middle Tennessee as a 9.5-point underdog, playing them really tough. Playing them pretty close, although Kennesaw was losing, but they never went away in the game. Now they have to try to repeat that effort in the second straight road game. Looks like a difficult spot to me, in Western Kentucky coming off losing to Jacksonville State at home as a 6.5-point favorite. Not a game that Western Kentucky should have lost. I don't know if they were just looking ahead or what the deal was, but Western Kentucky, and they lost to FIU before that badly too, which that is a really bad-looking loss. So I don't know what the deal was there. Maybe they got caught because that was a second straight road game, and they just beaten Liberty, which was a big win for them, beating Liberty. So could have been a letdown spot playing FIU, and then I don't know what happened in the Jacksonville State game. But I would look for a bounce back from Western Kentucky. They look worse than they actually are, and it's an 8-point spread in this game. And if you look at the two teams, it doesn't look like it should be an 8.5-point spread here, with Kennesaw only being like a half-point worse record-wise than Western Kentucky. But Western Kentucky is the significantly better team there and in a better spot to bounce back, whereas Kennesaw could be in a bit of a hangover type of spot there. So that is the way that I would look at that one. I looked at this one in Eastern Michigan. Man, it's taking me forever, man, but don't worry. I mean, we've still got an hour and a half here. So much college basketball. Eastern Michigan, they don't look like they're in a good spot. They just went to Toledo as 9.5-point underdogs. Toledo, one of the best teams in the MAC, and Eastern Michigan took them basically to the wire almost. It gave them all they can handle, man. Eastern Michigan made a huge comeback in this game. Maybe Toledo got complacent. Eastern Michigan played them pretty much right to the wire. Huge performance from Eastern Michigan. And now they got to turn around and face Akron right after that, who's also a pretty good team in this conference. So that would have me leaning to the Akron side in this one. But then again, Akron, you're probably still laying too many points with Akron just because everybody knows they're the better team. And they do have Toledo and Ohio both coming up next, and those are both big opponents, so it is possibly a look ahead. They're kind of rolling right now. They do have momentum right now, but they beat Central Michigan in their last game, was not a very good team at all. So I still think the spot is better for Akron, but line value-wise might not totally be there. Akron down from 9 to 8, and they still might be looking ahead to Toledo a little bit, but Eastern Michigan could wind up being pretty tired coming off that huge performance there against Toledo. Next up is another play for me. I have 6 plays in college basketball. This is the 4th. You know what I do, baby boy. And this is a classic toad spot here. Take the points with Arkansas, plus 4.5. I don't know where the line is now. This is going to be a fade spot, fading Florida, and what I think is a giant letdown spot. Florida, actually, you can get 5 now, it looks like, so maybe you can get 5, 4.5, 5. Florida laying a bunch of points on the road. They're public. I mean, obviously, Florida's going to be public. I mean, people are going to look at what they just did. They just played into the 100s in a loss against Kentucky, and then they just crushed Tennessee, who was the number 1 ranked team and was undefeated. So what else could Florida possibly do, man? They look like one of the best teams in the country, and they are. I think they're like a top 10 team, but this spot is just not very good, in my opinion, for Florida. Public is pouring in on them. 69% of tickets with 52% of the cash saying not so fast and coming in and taking Arkansas. And you know with Arkansas, with John Calipari there now, he knows how Florida plays, and he knows how to deal with Florida. When he was at Kentucky, Florida did struggle against Kentucky, and I went back in their last 8 matchups. John Calipari with Kentucky was 6-2 straight up against Florida in those 8 matchups. And I know Kentucky did have a better team in most of those scenarios, so sure, you could say that. But still, Calipari has had success in beating Florida. Florida is certainly better than Arkansas this year, though, of course. But this spot, this is peak letdown spot. I mean, this is a classic letdown spot. I mean, Florida's played 2 huge games in a row. Like I said, going to Kentucky and playing them really tough the whole way with both teams going up and down the court, fast pace, everything just being like a scoring possession, basically just frenetic pace, both teams getting into the 100s and only losing by 6. Then they came off of that and they still showed up and they absolutely drilled Tennessee by 30 points. I mean, how could you possibly look better than that? That is more than a statement game, man. That's like a win of the year. At home, in front of your home crowd, you beat the number 1 ranked Tennessee. And I think Tennessee is one of the top, 5 teams or so in the country. Probably not the absolute top team, but one of the top teams. And Florida came in and just absolutely annihilated them and embarrassed them. And Tennessee, I mean, there's no way that Tennessee is going to shoot this poorly again. 21.4 field goal percentage. 13.8 from 3. I mean, that's ridiculous. So Florida absolutely dominated them on the boards, though. Florida did have a dominant performance in this game nonetheless, but still, Tennessee, I mean, those are outlier shooting percentages. You never see, teams that are this good, you never see them shoot that poorly. I don't expect it to happen again in this next game here. Florida's having to go out on the road as well. Florida, by the way, they only have 2 road games so far, and they won at Florida State, which is still in Florida, and Florida State's not a very good team. And then their other road game was that loss at Kentucky, and I know, they played well, but again, this is a very tough spot for them, man, having to go into Arkansas. Arkansas is still looking for their first conference win, and Arkansas just lost at Tennessee, so then the public's going to also come in and say, wait a minute, Florida beat Tennessee by 30 points, and Tennessee beat Arkansas by 24, so Florida should beat Arkansas by 50 points in this game, right? What gives? The 5 actually looks really easy to lay in this game with Florida, and again, I say not so fast. Arkansas is still looking for their first win in the conference. They lost at Tennessee. Obviously, there's no shame in that. That was last week. I mentioned it looked like a spot where the line looked too big on Tennessee from a public perspective, but I said laying the points with Tennessee was the correct side in that one. I was correct. I didn't do it, though. Then Arkansas played against Ole Miss in their last game, and Ole Miss really starting to turn their defense around, man. I know their defense was very suspect last year, but Chris Beard being there, he's a defensive-minded coach, and he's really turning that Ole Miss defense around. Ole Miss is good. I mean, Arkansas, I know they were a home favorite, though, so they might not feel too great about having that loss there. Arkansas has lost both these SEC games so far. They're going to show up, man. I mean, they're staying at home. Florida just beat Tennessee, and it's coming into their place. Top 10 ranked team. They don't have anything really to look forward to. LSU, I mean, they're an okay team, but their focus is going to be on this game. This is a big game. It's on ESPN. They're hosting it. I think Calipari is going to get them ready. And Arkansas, they've played well in some of these other games and only losing to Baylor by 5. They lost to Illinois. I mean, Illinois is definitely good as well, and they beat Michigan, and Michigan is a very good team as well. So Arkansas, they've played a pretty strong schedule as well. So I like all of that. I mean, both of these teams have faced a fairly strong schedule, but I think Florida probably has been the weaker of the two. Ken Bum Yeah, actually, Ken Baum kind of has them both in the 200s as far as strength of schedule, so I don't know. He actually has Florida's strength of schedule a little bit stronger, which it may be, but I don't know. I think both of these teams have stronger schedules than what Ken Baum is telling you. He's got Florida at 78th in tempo, and that's the other thing. Arkansas can play at their tempo. So, I mean, does that worry me a little bit that it's going to be another fast-paced game and that is the pace that Florida wants to play? Maybe, but I just think it's a spot where Florida may get caught, man. I mean, this is just a peak letdown spot here where, yeah, Florida's the better team. Both of these teams play similar, and Florida is just the better of the two teams. But in a spot like this, I think Arkansas will show up and make a game of it, man. Especially because they are able to play defense. I mean, both these teams are actually pretty good on defense, even though they're both teams that could score a bit as well. Arkansas, I believe, is a bit more defensive-minded than offensive-minded, so that might be what you're looking at here. And as far as the luck index, he has both these teams kind of middle of the pack luck. I mean, there's not a whole lot to see there. Really, this whole thing is about the situation. Give me Arkansas plus the points in that one. I think that's just classic letdown spot. Huge letdown spot for Florida on that one. What's up, Andrew? Somebody sports way you can contribute, yeah, because you're not a sports ball guy. You're more like Jose. Call it sports ball and just don't pay attention to it. 2 to 3 Lakers games you saw at the Forum, yeah, in Hell A. Oh, way back in 89 and 90, man. You probably saw some really good players in that era then, man. I don't know who their opponents were in those games, but you saw some good. So who did you got to see? What, like Magic Johnson and who else? I forget what the time period even is now. I mean, that was when I was a kid, so I'm trying to remember who was still on the Lakers at that point. I think Johnson was still there, right? I forget who else was there at the time, but yeah, you probably saw some pretty good players there. And James Worthy, maybe, was he there around that time? Yeah, I mean, you got to see some good stuff there, man. All right, let's see. Okay. Whew. I mean, UNLV is at Colorado State, and I will just point out, UNLV just got absolutely embarrassed in their last game, 81-59 at Boise. I know Boise's a good team, and they do have Utah State and San Diego State up next, and those are two big opponents, but I don't know if you're going to let a loss like that stand, man. But it is a difficult environment having to play a second straight road game going into Colorado State, so I don't really want to try to play UNLV, even though it is an embarrassed spot. Colorado State is coming off absolutely blasting Fresno, though, and they do have San Diego State up next in 3 days. So it is a spot where maybe Colorado State might overlook UNLV there. So still would have a slight lean to UNLV there. Colorado State is up from 5 to 5.5 with juice, though. But again, these odds makers, they're really lining Mountain West favorites really heavy now because they know how well the Mountain West favorites have tended to do. 67% of tickets, 84% of the cash on Colorado State. Especially recently, the favorites have been really good there, but I don't know if I buy that as far as that's concerned. I mean, I would probably slightly lean to UNLV, given the situation there. Wichita probably in a bounce back spot against UTSA, coming off that real ugly performance. I mean, they're coming off a close loss to Temple. That was a pretty competitive game, pretty big game there, and I think they got hung over a little bit, and they just had a bad game, almost losing by 20 at home. It's almost a double-digit favorite to USF. South Florida. I think they're going to bounce back from that. They're going to get out of there, go on the road, have a better performance against UTSA there. So that's the way I would look there. UTSA, I know they're coming off kind of a bad-looking loss to Tulsa, but Wichita's just the way better team. They're laying up from 5.5 to 6 now. They do have 60% of the cash coming in on them, with 60% of the tickets taking Texas San Antonio. I don't know why the public would want to get involved in this game, especially on the UTSA side, but I would look to lay the points in that one with Wichita if I was going to play that one. We're in the 4 p.m. slate here. I'll mention Virginia is one of those ACC teams that's now having to play out on the Pacific Coast. So again, just be aware of that. It may be a little bit of a bad spot. But these Pacific Coast ACC teams that are hosting these teams that are not familiar with going out there, I mean, those lines are very high now because of that being the situation. We have a big rivalry here, Battle of North Carolina, UNC and NC State. And I think North Carolina's flying under the radar right now, man. I mean, everybody's saying North Carolina sucks because they started out the season really bad, but look at their losses. Kansas, Auburn, Michigan State, Alabama, Florida, and then, yeah, they lost to Louisville. I mean, that was a game where I thought they would show up against Louisville. That was a bit of a step down in class, and they beat UCLA as well. So really North Carolina's played a gauntlet, man. I mean, they played one of the most difficult schedules in the entire country, and they beat Dayton. Dayton's pretty good. Really, there's been almost no let-up in North Carolina's schedule, man. I mean, they are the better team here. Even though people might look and think this is maybe a little bit competitive, I think they might think this is more competitive than it really is because of North Carolina's ugly record to start the season. But again, they lost to a lot of good teams in there. They really had a gauntlet. This North Carolina team, they're certainly not bad. I mean, they might not be that like top tier North Carolina team that we're used to a lot of these years, but still, they're better than NC State. I mean, both these teams just had recent one-point wins against Notre Dame, and of course, I lost on NC State in that one. NC State had chances to win that game by more than one and cover for me as a -2 favorite, but they didn't do it. Maybe I shouldn't have played it just because maybe this is still a look ahead to North Carolina. I like North Carolina in this game, even though I know it's on the road. I think North Carolina is the significantly better team. They face a really, really difficult schedule so far. They're extremely battle-tested. They are down from -5.5 to 5, though. And the public does look like they're coming in on the North Carolina side. 80% of tickets, but 88% of the cash. So hard to read the market in that one. But my opinion is that both teams are going to show up for this rivalry game. And it is just probably a little bit too much of a mismatch there. I think North Carolina is the significantly better team. Ken Baum's got them in the top 30. He has them as the 7th strongest strength of schedule in the entire country. And he's got NC State all the way down to the 90s rankings-wise. So, yeah, he's got North Carolina as a significantly better team, and NC State in the bottom, 30 or so as far as strength of schedule, or bottom 40 as far as strength of schedule is concerned. So there's no comparison between the two. North Carolina's faced a way more difficult schedule. They are the better team there. Okay. I mean, Vermont, they're coming off a game where they beat UMass Lowell. That was a pretty big game. Vermont looks a little bit down this year, but beating the team that might be the best team in the American East this year, UMass Lowell, on the road is a pretty good win for Vermont. Now they're playing a third straight road game at Bryant. I know Bryant's one of the better teams in this conference too, probably, but looks like a difficult spot there. And Bryant, they're coming off smashing Maine. But again, I don't think they're going to overlook Vermont. And Bryant, they face a pretty difficult schedule, man. So their record, maybe not totally indicative of what they are. Losing to St. Bonaventure on the road, Chattanooga on the road. No real shame in that. St. John's. Some of these losses are not to bad teams. Grand Canyon, all those on the road as well. They face a lot of road games too. So I would maybe look to Bryant in that one. Bryant is actually the favorite, but they're down from 3.5 to 2.5. Everybody knows that Vermont has basically owned this conference for so long, but seeing that Bryant is actually a favorite in this one looks a little bit suspect, especially when they're below 500, and Vermont is the dominant team in this conference for basically for as long as anybody can remember, and is still above 500, even though they are down. It almost looks a little bit too easy to take the points with Vermont in that one. So I would be hesitant in that one to do so. All right. Whew. Utah Valley, they're coming off a big win over Grand Canyon, man. That was a huge conference win, which these two teams might be the top teams in the WAC this year. Now they're facing Cal Baptist. I know Cal Baptist is one of the better teams in this conference too, but this could be a letdown spot, man. That's kind of a statement win in the conference when you beat Grand Canyon, and Grand Canyon's won the conference at least twice, I think, in the last 3 years, or maybe 2 years in a row or something like that. Cal Baptist, they're coming off a nice win over Seattle, but that shows me something because they came off a game against UC Irvine, which is a really tough game. Irvine's good, and they played them pretty tough, and then they still turned around and beat Seattle. Now they're having to go out on the road. I would look to take the points with Cal Baptist in this one. Again, obviously not a play for me, but let me see. Utah Valley's up from 4.5 to 5. I think maybe they're laying a little bit too much of a price in that one. Jackson State, this is just hilarious, man. Jackson State, they're 1-13, and they just finally won a game. They're 0-13 coming into this game, and they finally beat Alcorn State. They were 0-13, but they're 1-0 in the SWAC conference. So what is that telling you? I don't know, man. Jackson State, are they really as bad as their 1-13 record looks as far as SWAC is concerned? I don't think so. Look at the schedule that Jackson State has played. Houston, High Point, Xavier, Vanderbilt, Western Kentucky, Lipscomb, St. Louis, Arkansas State, Iowa State. UTEP is atop their conference as well. Every one of those games a road game, or at least a non-home game. Then Akron at home. Akron's good as well in the MAC. And then on the road at Cal Baptist. Jackson State may have the toughest schedule in all of college basketball so far, man. Ken Palm might have them at number 1. He has them at number 3, but still, that's just ridiculous, man. I can't believe that this has been their schedule. I mean, they're not a good team. They're in the SWAC, but as far as them being an 0-13 team, you think that they're like as bad as Mississippi Valley State or Arkansas Pine Bluff? They're not. They're definitely better than those teams, and Jackson State did finally win against Alcorn State. So they finally got that monkey off their back. That was a game where both teams had no wins, though. So that was an 0-for against an 0-for. Some people are probably not shocked by that, although Jackson State was actually a road favorite. But now look at this. Jackson's got that win out of the way now, man. So that monkey's off their back. So I think this is a positive spot now for Jackson State because they finally have that one win. They're very battle-tested at the very least. They've had one of the most difficult schedules you could possibly imagine. And they're a 1-win team that looks like they're a terrible team up against a 6-9 team who's undefeated in the conference, Alabama State. Yet Jackson State's laying points here, although they are at home. But if the public looks at this game, what gives? How is a 1-13 team a favorite against anybody? Well, the odds makers are telling you that's just how difficult Jackson State's schedule has been. And I like that they actually just finally won a game and finally rose from the ranks of the winless and got out of there and got the win. Alabama, they've won Alabama State, have won both their conference games so far, but it was against Mississippi Valley State and Arkansas Pine Bluff, the two teams I just said, and those are probably the two worst teams in this conference. They're both awful. Against Pine Bluff, though, they were a 13.5-point favorite, and they did almost lose. So is that going to, shock Alabama State back into focus here? I don't know. That's the one thing that kind of gives me pause other than how degenerate it would look to do this. But, I actually think there is a reason to lay the points with Jackson State. They're actually up from 3-3 with juice. If you want to look like a real degenerate, but you actually still know your shit and you know what you're talking about, I actually think Jackson State is not a bad way to look in this game. They're way better than the record indicates at the very least. Even though they're not good, they're still probably like a mid-tier SWAC team there, and they can certainly compete with Alabama State. And the odds makers are telling you Jackson State is close to about even, at least power ratings-wise, with Alabama State. That's just wild, man. That's a wild one. Arkansas State is at Troy. This is a good one, man, in the Sun Belt. Both of these teams close to the top of the Sun Belt. Arkansas State did just suffer two really tough losses to James Madison and South Alabama. Those are both two teams close to the top of this conference as well. So those are difficult losses, and now they're playing a fourth straight road game against another one of the top teams in the conference. It looks like a pretty difficult spot to me for Arkansas State having to go in there. And Troy, they're kind of sneaking up on people in this conference. They just lost at home as a favorite of 6.5 to Texas State, so maybe they were looking ahead to this game. They're coming off an ugly loss, and they're kind of in bounce-back mode here, man, and they're not traveling, staying at home. So the spot looks better for Troy. Arkansas State also likes to play a really fast pace, and Troy does not. Troy's going to want to slow the game down and play defense. So I like Troy in this game. They're laying up from 1.5 to 2 now. I would lean to Troy in that one if I was going to play that one. Oh, excuse me, man. Got all this heartburn, man. I haven't even eaten anything for breakfast yet. How would I feel if I'd eaten breakfast is the question, though. I'd probably have even worse heartburn, actually. All right. Next up, man. Do I want to talk about Seton Hall and Providence? These are two teams. I think Providence is actually kind of underperforming, man, if I were to guess. They've played pretty competitively against some of the best teams in the Big East. They came off that tough game against UConn, where they took UConn right to the wire. Huge performance. They came off of that, and they still destroyed Butler. So that kind of tells me something, that Providence is maybe a little bit better than the record would indicate so far, whereas Seton Hall, they're actually bad, in my opinion. Their only win in the conference right now is against DePaul. Not very good. They almost beat Georgetown in a game where I had Seton Hall plus the points, and they just got in within the number, coming from way behind to get me that backdoor cover there of the plus 1.5 or 2. I think they got in there, losing by 1. Holy crap. This Seton Hall team is not a good team, man. So I do think Providence is probably the way to look in that game, although they're down from 9 to 7.5 with 75% of tickets and only 64% of the cash. So the public looks like they're on Providence. And it looks like maybe some of the money's coming in and taking Seton Hall. I'm not really sure that I agree with that because I don't think Butler is really that great of an opponent. I think that was just a nice win for Providence to break that like losing momentum they had, and they lost to good teams there, and most of them were close. St. Bonaventure, St. John's, 2 close losses. UConn, very close loss on the road nonetheless, and they did lose to Marquette. Marquette is a very good team though, so yeah, interesting one there. Next up is another play for me, and yeah, I know I'm going into the dregs here now. This is getting super degenerate now, although I talked about Jackson State. I don't know what's more degenerate than that, although I'm not playing Jackson State, but I am going to play Austin Peay, not only just because I like to say Austin Peay, the Pissers. Austin Peay, what are they, the Governors or something like that? Oh, of Clarksville, Tennessee. Clarksville, kid. This is in the, what the hell conference is this now? I don't even know what conference this is now. I don't even know where I am anywhere. This is the A-Sun. That's right. Atlantic Sun. Austin Peay, they have not faced that easiest schedule, man. They actually beat Butler, beat Chattanooga, which is not that bad. They stepped it up for Chattanooga. Chattanooga being an in-state little brother. I actually had Chattanooga in that game, I'm pretty sure, and I lost because I thought Austin Peay was in a letdown spot after that huge win over Butler, but still, whatever. Austin Peay did lose to Tennessee. I mean, obviously, you're not going to knock them for that. Moorhead is still one of the better teams in the Ohio Valley. And they have a loss to Samford in their Ohio. Vandy. I mean, yeah, their record isn't very good, but still, they face a pretty strong schedule, man. Pretty difficult schedule, and now they're coming off a couple of real horrendous-looking losses, man. After they beat North Florida on the road and a nice win, they went to Jacksonville and they lost by 20 points as a 5.5-point underdog. Got just blasted. And then they came home in what should have been a bounce-back spot as an 8.5-point favorite. They lost to West Georgia, who's a newcomer to Division I, I'm pretty sure. Maybe even this year or maybe last year, whatever it was. That is a bad loss, man. Anyway you look at it, that looks ugly, but I think it's going to be a bounce-back spot now for Austin Peay. You have that game where you play that badly at home as a favorite, you're going to want to bounce back from that, man. And that was disgusting, pretty much. And they really played badly in that game. West Georgia shot 52% from the floor, and that was 52.7. I don't think you're going to see that happen again here. Austin Peay is playing Queens in this game. Queens, I mean, this is a game where there's a lot going on in this game. It looks like a misleading spread as far as what these records look like here. I know Queens, they did play some tough teams as well, losing at Utah, losing at BYU, but they got absolutely annihilated in those 2 games. And they did lose to Ole Miss on the road as well, also getting crushed in that game. So on the road, they played a lot of road games. They haven't been as good on the road. I believe they're something like 2-4 on the road now. They did win their last road game against Gardner-Webb. This is, I believe, going to be their first. This is their first road conference game. Yeah, because they've won. Or no, Lipscomb was their first. Yeah, that's why I'm playing against Queens. What am I saying? Queens just went and they played Lipscomb, man, who may be the best team in the Atlantic Sun. Lipscomb has won the Atlantic Sun at least once in recent years. That was a big game for Queens, man. I mean, they just beat Florida Gulf Coast. They're now off to a 3-0 start in conference. And they just went on the road to Lipscomb in a game where they were a 13.5-point underdog. That tells you how good Queens really is, man. I mean, both of these teams have really similar records. Lipscomb was a double-digit favorite in this game, 13.5, although it looks like some of the money did drive it down a little bit. But Queens, I mean, this looks like it was probably a competitive matchup, but if you look at the spread, the odds makers are telling you no. Lipscomb was actually the way better team here, and Queens pulled off a giant upset. And it was just a big game, beating like one of the best teams in the conference. And now they're going to play a second straight road game against Austin Peay. And Austin Peay, again, they're not off to a good start here. Austin Peay only has that one win in conference so far. It was against North Florida, who at least started off the season pretty well, although they've kind of fallen apart since then and don't have a win in conference, even though they won against like 2 big conference teams early in the season somehow. But this looks like a way better spot to me for Austin Peay. They're still just staying at home. They're off a really bad-looking loss. And then if you look at the market on this, you're looking at a Queens team that's 10-6 up against a 6-10 team, and the line is pick the winner basically, but it's actually Austin Peay being a favorite. Like, what gives there? Like, how could that possibly be the case? If the public looks at this spread looks like it makes no sense, but the odds makers are telling you, I mean, yeah, both teams have kind of a similar strength of schedule, I guess. The odds makers are just telling you that Queens, they're just not that good, really. I mean, they're way worse than Lipscomb. They are better than Austin Peay, but not by much. And Austin Peay is climbed from like a pick 'em to, like I said, like up to about a 1-point favorite. I saw lines all over the place in this one, so I actually was able to take them at a +1 dog price. If you want to get them at a pick 'em, money line, whatever you want to do, I like Austin Peay in this one. We'll take a piss with Austin Peay in this one, man. And as far as Ken Palm is concerned, I mean, he's got both of these teams really bad, but he's got Queens all the way down. He's got them at 230th in the country. That's not great. He does have them playing at the 81st fastest tempo, whereas he has Austin Peay at 289th. So Austin Peay is going to try to play a way slower pace game. I know Austin Peay really can't score, so that's the one worry here. Austin Peay, they play better defense, but they play a really, really bad offensive style. But still, they're an ugly team, and they play decent defense, and they play real slow. So that leads you to believe that it's a nice setup for Austin Peay here as well, because you got a slow-paced team hosting a faster team, and that slow-paced team, if they're able to slow the game, that can really start frustrating that faster-paced team. He does have Austin Peay as having the 58th strongest strength of schedule as well, with Queens only at 152. So he does have Queens with the less strong schedule, and he has Queens 9th in the country in luck. So Ken Palm has Queens, just like I said, as far as the odds makers are telling you as well, Queens has been way overperforming so far. I mean, Queens, yeah, they're the better offensive team out of these two, but I actually think you're getting the better defense with Austin Peay in this game. They just can't score. So you're getting the better defense at home in a spot that looks pretty suspicious, and I think it's a better spot for the home team, and it's a bad spot for the road team here. Give me Austin Peay for all those reasons, man. So that's that play. Trying to get all this done here, man. What am I up to as far as... holy crap, I'm already over an hour, and I still got to talk about hockey as well. All right, we got Tennessee and Texas. This is a good game. I know Texas is not ranked right now, but Tennessee, how are they going to respond to that loss at Florida is the question, man. I mean, Tennessee, yeah, you could say that's an ugly loss, so they're going to bounce back from that. But on the other hand, if you're undefeated and you're rolling along, you're undefeated, and then you have a big game that you get up emotionally for, and you just get hammered like that and sent crashing back down to earth, that's the type of loss that can actually hang you over into the next game. And it's a second straight road game. So I don't know if I love the way this sets up, man. Texas is still looking for their first win in conference. They're coming off. They did lose pretty badly to Texas A&M, and then they actually played close against Auburn. Played pretty tough, although Auburn was beating them by double digits, and I think Auburn kind of took their foot off the gas. But Texas did put in a full effort and didn't go away, so not quite a spot where I want to come in and play Texas either, but I think it could be a hangover spot for Tennessee in this one, man. So, and Tennessee probably still laying way too many points. Let me see. What are they laying in this one? Up from 4 to 4.5, with 76% of tickets and only 70% of cash. So I think it does make sense to maybe fade the public of this one and take Texas. I don't really want to do it just because they did put in a big effort against Auburn in their last game, but they are going to be focused for a game up against Tennessee as well. It's tough to play the number 2 and then number 1 ranked team back-to-back like that. So not on back-to-back days, but 2 straight games in a row. So that's that game. Oklahoma and Georgia, this is a really, really hard one for me to figure out. Oklahoma's ranked 17th in the country. Georgia's unranked. You go and you look at this line, and Georgia, where was there? I just saw them, is up from a 4 to a 7.5 point favorite at home. 65% of tickets and 87% of the cash on Georgia. So it looks like the money's coming in at Georgia. This line makes no sense to me because Ken Palm has these two teams ranked almost even. He has Georgia like slightly better, so the 4 would make sense in that case. The 7.5 makes no sense. So I went and I looked, and I'm like, are there injuries on Oklahoma? And I don't see any. It seems like they're not. I saw Oklahoma talking about how they got beaten up physically in their last game, but I don't see any injuries here. So I don't know what has driven this line that far up. And Georgia's not in a good spot, man. I just played Georgia. I won on Georgia in the last game because that was Kentucky coming off that big Florida game. And I think Kentucky had another big game up today. Maybe, I forget. Did I talk about that? I don't even remember. Georgia pulled off that big win over Kentucky, man. That was a huge win at home. Now they got Oklahoma, who I know Oklahoma's ranked, but look who Georgia has up in 4 days. Tennessee and then Auburn. So this looks like a sandwich spot to me for Georgia, as much as it is a ranked conference foe here. But Oklahoma is 0-2 to start conference play, but they lost to Alabama on the road. I mean, you're not going to knock them for that. And they lost to Texas A&M. Close game, though. That was the game that they got beat up physically. Texas A&M, by the way, was without, what the hell is his name? Their best player. How do I not remember Texas A&M's best player's name right now? Wade Taylor the fourth. Yeah, something the fourth. He was hurt in that game, so I believe he didn't play. And I don't know if and when he's going to come back for Texas A&M. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at Texas A&M. Oklahoma, that was a tough game for them, though, playing Texas A&M almost to the wire. So this is a tough game for me to gauge as well, man. The line looks like it's too high to me, and it looks like it's too many points to be laying for Georgia as far as like a value perspective is concerned. I don't get why the line is that high. So, and Oklahoma's still looking for their first win in conference at the very least, so I would probably slightly lean to taking the points with Oklahoma, but you know I'm not going to do that. There's no way I'm going to do that. Ole Miss just beat Arkansas. Nice win beating Arkansas, and they beat Georgia the game before that. A couple of nice SEC wins to start conference play. Now they got LSU, who's a little bit of a team that they may overlook a little bit because they do have Alabama, Mississippi State, and Texas A&M all up in a row starting 3 days from now. So it is possible that Ole Miss overlooks LSU in this spot. LSU not off to a good start in conference play, having lost 2 games and not to the top SEC teams either in Vandy and Mizzou. And they lost pretty badly to Mizzou, so I think they could want to bounce back in this game. It is maybe somewhat difficult still because they're playing a second straight road game, but I would look to take the points with LSU in this one. And Ole Miss is very public, sitting at a 10-point favorite, up a little bit on that. 90% of tickets, 93% of the cash. So I would look to maybe take the points with LSU there. Virginia Tech is out at Cal. So again, one of those weird ACC spots where they're out on the Pacific Coast. I don't like it. I don't like to play these ACC teams that are traveling cross country and playing in unfamiliar venues. Drake could be in a letdown spot coming off that huge win over Bradley, but then again, they're playing Evansville, and Evansville is terrible, and Drake is a huge favorite here, but they are down from 17.5 to 14.5, it looks like. So it looks like some money has come in fading Drake to some extent, although this looks like they're sitting at 16, so I don't know. But they are at the very least maybe in a little bit of a letdown spot there. And then in the undercard here as well, Northern Colorado, Montana is probably going to be a good game in the Big Sky. These teams are probably the top 2 teams in the conference, actually, or 2 of the top few. Pretty big matchup there between these 2 teams. Northern Colorado is coming off winning on the road, upsetting Montana State, only a 1.5-point upset. Montana State is actually a little bit better than the record indicates, in my opinion. That's a big win for Northern Colorado, though. Montana State won this conference like 3 years in a row, not too long ago. So a pretty big win there. Montana, they're coming off beating Northern Arizona, and that was a game where Montana kind of struggled in the game and weren't able to really put Northern Arizona away until late. Didn't cover the spread as a 7.5-point favorite. So I think Montana, it probably sets up a little bit better for Montana in this one, especially they're also being at home here. Montana's up from 2.5 to 3 with juice now, so the money looks like it is in agreement with that. The market looks agreeing with Montana, 74% of the cash coming in on them and 50% of the tickets evenly split, because I think if the public looks at this, they're going to say, oh, this is an even matchup here, and actually Northern Colorado has a record a little bit better than Montana, so they're going to want to take the points. I would slightly disagree with that and look to Montana in that game. UNC Greensboro and Samford is probably going to be a good game too, man. I mean, these are 2 of the top teams in the SoCon. Neither team really in that strange a spot, I wouldn't say. Although Greensboro played a more difficult game. They came off that win over Furman, and I thought they were going to be a sandwich spot, and they still pulled off the win at Chattanooga. So they've played somewhat more difficult games, and Samford is up from 5.5 to 6. I would probably lean that way. I would probably agree with laying the points with Samford because UNC Greensboro has just been putting in huge effort after huge effort. And even though they're going to step up for this game as well, at some point I think they're going to start getting tired. Second straight road game. Samford's coming off a much easier win over VMI. So from a rest perspective, at the very least, you should see Samford probably in the better position in that one. What else? And now we got our final play of the day as we get into the night slate here. We got St. John's -6.5. That is my last college basketball play of the day to cap it off at night. You know this is a classic spot for me, man. Villanova, they're coming off their biggest win of the year, man. That was a statement win for them. That was a legitimizing win for them, especially for a Villanova team that has been kind of just a bubble team recently. They missed the tournament, I think, at least the last year, maybe the last couple of years. They were looking for a statement win, man. They played a pretty difficult schedule, too. They did lose to an in-city little brother in St. Joe's who was going to step it up for them and isn't that bad a team. They lost to Virginia. I mean, I know Virginia's not really that good, and then they lost to Maryland. They beat Cincinnati, not a bad game there. They did beat Seton Hall. Seton Hall, we know they're down, though. Beating Temple by almost 30 is a pretty good-looking win as well. Losing to Creighton on the road, not going to knock them for that loss. I think I actually might have... Did I play Creighton in that one? I don't remember. Maybe I didn't. And then a second straight road game, they still went and they beat Butler. They beat DePaul by almost 50 points. And then they went in and they beat UConn. As we saw, and the refs kind of tried to help UConn at the end with some foul calls. Still, Villanova pulled off that huge win. If you're Villanova and you've been basically kind of out of it for a couple of years, you've been missing the tournament, you haven't been great the last couple of years, and you pull off a win against a top 10 ranked team still, a team that's won back-to-back championships, and a team that won the Big East, I think both of those years as well, or at least last year they did. That's a huge statement win. That's a legitimizing win for Villanova. Now they have to go out on the road to face St. John's, and I think St. John's actually is kind of underperforming in a way. And St. John's is just kind of rolling along right now, beating Butler and Xavier. I mean, not huge wins for them. Coming back home, playing a big game against Villanova, coming into their house. I think you're going to see St. John's be ready for this one. St. John's, I mean, they played a somewhat difficult schedule as well. Their losses are not bad at all. Losing to Baylor by 1 point, losing to Georgia by only 3, and then Creighton by 1 point on the road. So St. John's, I mean, yeah, they have not been bad this year, man. They're pretty good. KenPom actually has them as like a top 20 team in the entire nation. So I like how this sets up. St. John's up from 6 to 6.5 with 70% of the cash coming in on them, 50% of tickets evenly split. So I like the market read on every one of these, man. And KenPom has St. John's 22nd, in the country. So he does have them better than Villanova, who he has down at 42nd. And we know, if you follow college sports, you know what this is. This is a huge pacing collision with Villanova at 347th out of 365 or whatever in tempo. He does also have Villanova only having faced the 321st strongest schedule, where he has St. John's at 216th, so not that strong. But he has St. John's as having faced the more difficult schedule. And he's got St. John's at 54th in tempo, so we have a huge tempo disparity here. And if St. John's being the better team at home, St. John's should be able to get this in a really fast-paced game, which is going to throw Villanova out of their element. Villanova does not want to play fast, and it also helps when you're laying points. You tend to want a team that's going to want to play fast and push the pace, so you get more possessions and more of a chance to cover a number like that. So for all those reasons, I like St. John's. And St. John's, KenPom has them at 330th in luck, so he has them as a very underperforming team so far, too. Kind of flying under the radar. He does actually have, surprisingly, as Villanova as the better offensive efficiency team this year at 10th in the country. And Villanova, you usually think of them as bad offense, good defense, and slow pace. But he has them as actually their defense isn't quite as good. And he actually has St. John's as 6th in the country in defensive efficiency. So even though they play fast, somehow St. John's plays really well defensively, and he has them a little bit worse on the offensive side of things. So very strange there as well. Again, it's the spot for it. Give me St. John's, or I will lay the points with St. John's. All right, and then big matchup between San Francisco and Santa Clara. And this might be the first one that I've seen where two teams are facing each other for the second time already in conference. It's pretty early in the season still for a second matchup, but we have one here. Even though conference play just started, San Fran beat Santa Clara by 3 points at home a few games ago. Now San Francisco is coming off a game where they kind of just went through the motions, I think, against Portland. This is a tough game to gauge, man. Santa Clara, I thought they would win the game and cover against Oregon State. They won, but barely, and it wound up going into overtime as well. So Santa Clara had to play a tougher game, and it was a game against an Oregon State team that is a team that still has that, kind of air around them. They're a bigger conference team. So Santa Clara, even though this is going to be a quick revenge spot, I don't know that it's really the greatest spot for them, man. And the line is about where it should be, as San Francisco was, I believe, around a 4-point favorite at home. That means that Santa Clara should probably be around a 2 or so favorite here. They are up from 2 to 3, and it looks like the money may be coming in on their side with the tickets maybe coming in on San Francisco, but I would look to take the points with San Francisco if I was going to play this game, because San Francisco is coming off just kind of an easy go through the motions type of game, where Santa Clara is coming off a game where they had a bigger opponent who they beat by 1 in overtime. So going to be difficult. Going to be difficult. That's a new tough and difficult. Difficult. I'm gonna start using that term. It's going to be difficult for them to play at that effort 2 games in a row like that. Although of course they are going to show up. They want to win this game. It's going to be a good game, I think. And then we have our only game of the day with 2 ranked teams. Alabama, number 5 at Texas A&M -10. Texas A&M, ranked 10th. Of course, they're not laying 10 points. Ranked 10th in the country. I'm totally out of it, man. I still have to talk about fucking hockey and NBA. Holy crap. Yeah, Texas A&M, you got to look, because remember, I just said Wade. I already forget his name again. I always forget this guy's name, man. I know it's Wade, and I want to say Wade Wilson. I'm like, no, he's not Deadpool. He's also not that guy who was serial killing women with the face tattoos. Wade Taylor the Fourth. I keep forgetting that. Something the Fourth. You got to keep an eye on his injury report and see if he's back in this game or not. That's going to be one thing you got to know if you're going to play this game. Alabama's up from 1-3 on the road, so it looks like some money has come in on Alabama, but we do see 57% of tickets and 70% of the cash on A&M. So I kind of doubt that the public's going to be coming in and playing at Texas A&M in this one. I think they like Alabama. I mean, Alabama's a 2-loss team, even though both these teams are, well, so maybe, I don't know, maybe some public bettors will see this as a competitive game and want to look to take the points in this one. But Alabama, everybody likes that they score. They made the Final Four last year. And this Alabama team, they also face a very difficult schedule, too. I mean, Purdue, Illinois, Houston, North Carolina, Oregon. I mean, those are difficult games. Even Oklahoma. And Alabama coming off a couple of kind of easy wins. I thought this was a tough game, sandwich spot. They went on the road and they still beat South Carolina by 20 points. So that tells me there's not a whole lot of let up in this Alabama team, even though Alabama is facing a second straight road game here. I do expect them to be focused here. I expect both teams to be focused here. Texas A&M, they also just beat Oklahoma, but they only beat them by 2, so that's another thing where I would think the public would be coming in on Alabama here, because Alabama crushed Oklahoma, and Texas A&M barely got by them after Texas A&M did beat Texas pretty easily. Texas A&M definitely better than Texas this year. I think both teams are going to show up for this one, though, man. It's a tough game for me to gauge. I mean, to me, it almost looks too easy still to lay the points with Alabama, so I might look to take the points with Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a very good rebounding team, and if Texas A&M is able to maybe try to slow the pace down a little bit, because they play a lot slower tempo than Alabama does. They're going to want to try to slow the pace down. They have the better defense, and they're getting points at home. So for those reasons, maybe Texas A&M does make sense as the side in this one. And again, you got to look to see if Wade, whatever the hell his name is, something the Fourth, you got to look to see if he's actually back in that one. Indiana's at Iowa. I mean, this is a game where neither of these teams are that great in the Big Ten, but it is still kind of an interesting Big Ten matchup. Could be a good game. Iowa's up from 3.5 to 5 at home, so money coming in on Iowa. 54% of tickets. It was 60% of the cash coming in and playing Indiana. I mean, the public is going to look at this and think there's value playing Indiana, taking points as a 13-3 team, as Indiana's got the bigger name, they got the better record, but I'm not so sure about that, man. I mean, Indiana, again, I think they face a pretty easy schedule so far. I don't think they're as good as we think they are this year. Iowa, this Iowa team, I mean, they don't play a good defense. I don't think they just like to play really fast pace, but we'll see. I mean, Iowa bounced back with a win. I played them in that game against Nebraska. It did go into overtime. I thought it was a bad spot with Nebraska, I believe, coming off a win over, who did Nebraska beat? I don't even remember. Was it UCLA? So I thought it was a letdown spot for them. Yeah, it was UCLA. I thought it was a letdown spot for Nebraska having to go on the road to Iowa in that one. But Iowa at least had a nice bounce-back win off that ugly loss at Wisconsin. Iowa's faced a little bit more of a difficult schedule, in my opinion, having lost to Utah State, Michigan, and Iowa State, so really, and Wisconsin. So really, Iowa doesn't have any bad losses. I mean, all those losses are to pretty good teams, and Indiana is actually kind of a step down from those other teams. So I actually do like the Iowa side as well. And Iowa, their team is going to try to make it really fast-paced, which could throw a lot of teams off. And Indiana, I mean, they do play fast as well, although not as fast. And Ken Bum does have Indiana 39th in luck. So he does have Indiana as being a bit overrated and overperforming so far. And, oh, my mistake. We do have Liberty and Louisiana Tech. This is a pretty big game in the Conference USA. Liberty coming off winning in a game that I thought was a sandwich spot after they just played Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee in 2 tough games, went on the road and still beat Sam Houston, and now they do have a second straight road game against La Tech. La Tech, pretty good team in this conference, even though I know they're 1-2 to start conference play, losing to UTEP and New Mexico State. Those teams are not that bad either. They got housed by New Mexico State, though, man, and they did bounce back from that with a nice win over FIU, which I think may propel them into this game. I actually think that it sets up better for Louisiana Tech, as they might be a little bit under the radar right now, not looking that good, and Liberty's coming off some more difficult games. Liberty down from 2-1 as a road favorite, but 67% of the tickets and only 66% of the cash makes it look like Louisiana Tech is a slightly public home underdog, which I would not want to get involved with, but I think maybe the money will turn around a little bit in that one, because it looks like the line is moved a little bit against Liberty. But what I was going to say is that my mistake was that Kentucky and Mississippi State is another ranked matchup tonight at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Number 6 and number 14. As I've been saying, I think Kentucky is a little bit overranked right now. They did just take a loss against Georgia, so maybe they'll be in a bounce-back spot, though, because they were coming off that big win over Florida. Second straight road game, though, not the easiest game. So I think both teams are going to show up here and be focused. Mississippi State actually has the better record, even though they're ranked lower than Kentucky. So public bettors might be a little bit confused by that. But Mississippi State probably has faced the weaker schedule than Kentucky has, even though they have a couple of nice wins in there against Pitt and Memphis. But other than that, not really a strong schedule so far for Mississippi State. And they do have Auburn up next, but they're not going to overlook Kentucky either. But I think it's a spot where both teams are going to show up, and you kind of want to probably, I would say, maybe even look to the better team here, but I don't know. Mississippi State is up from 4 to 5.5 now. 68% of tickets and 94% of the cash coming in on Mississippi State. So maybe the money does look like it's coming in on Mississippi State to some extent. So maybe the public is looking at this and thinking, well, we know Kentucky and they're the higher ranked team and they're getting points. So they may think that line is just kind of weird, and they may think there's value on taking the points of the Kentucky. So maybe you would want to fade that sentiment. This game is hard for me to figure out, because I think the situation is maybe a little bit worse for Kentucky because they played tougher games recently, and it is a second straight road game. So, yeah, that's a difficult one to gauge, actually, man. So the clincher for me would probably be the market read, and I would guess lean to Mississippi State in that one. All right, Boise is at Utah State. Utah State sitting at 5-point favorite, of course. I mean, Mountain West favorites. Mountain West home team's always going to be favored. 60% of tickets, 74% of cash on Boise. So it looks like the money is coming in on Boise. And Boise, they're coming off that game where they just absolutely wrecked UNLV. And they were coming off a tough game against San Diego State before that. So they might be feeling a little bit high on themselves, man. So I don't know if I agree with taking the points with Boise in this one. Utah State, I mean, they're coming off kind of just a ho-hum win where they didn't even cover as a 9.5-point road favorite, only winning by 7 at San Jose State. Coming back home here. So Utah State is the better team here, and they're not really in a bad spot. They're in a spot where they probably just looked past San Jose State, to be honest, and still won the game. And now they get a better opponent they will be focused on in Boise. And Boise, playing a few difficult games in a row, might be feeling pretty good off of that big win. So I actually kind of like Utah State in that one. And New Mexico State's facing UTEP, another nice big game there in whatever conference that is, the CUSA. New Mexico State's coming up beating Louisiana Tech by 30 points, though, and now having to go out on the road. So I think they could be feeling a little bit cocky and now having to go out on the road. UTEP might be able to catch them here. UTEP coming off a win that was a much more down-to-earth win against Sam Houston State there, and they did only beat Louisiana Tech by 10 the game before that. So the public bettors might look at this and think, wait a minute, I'm getting 7 points at New Mexico State here, who's the team that doesn't even have that much of a worse record than UTEP does, and they just beat Louisiana Tech by 30, and UTEP only beat them by 10. So I think the public might perceive that there'd be value taking the points here, but I would lay it with UTEP up from 6.5 to 7 now. That would be the way I would look in that one. I just think New Mexico State looks a little bit too good. And then we do have Baylor at Arizona State. So many games to talk about, man. Baylor coming off beating Cincinnati by 20 points. A nice win there. But now having to go back out on the road. And Baylor hasn't fared well on the road yet this season, man. A loss to UConn, although it was a close game. And then losing to Iowa State pretty badly. Iowa State's very good, though. Both of those teams are good. So I'm not going to knock Baylor for those losses. difficult to go out on the road, but they are coming off a nice win, kind of a bounce-back win, now going out on the road. It is an unfamiliar venue, though, because Arizona State's new to the Big 12, so Baylor's not really used to having to go out to Arizona to play these teams, so maybe that's a little bit of an advantage for Arizona State here. And Arizona State's coming off losing to Kansas by like 20 points, so they're probably going to be in bounce-back mode here. I do think Baylor's flying a little bit under the radar right now, though, so tough read here. Baylor up from 4 to 5.5 as almost looking like a public road favorite here. 57% of tickets and 84% of the cash taking the points with ASU, though. And again, unfamiliar venue could be a little bit of a difficult situation for Baylor to be in. This is a tough read for me, man, in this one. And it looks like even the market is conflicting against itself here as well, where some aspects of me are saying that, well, Baylor's the better team. That's what the numbers guys are going to say. So laying the points makes sense. And even it looks like maybe some public, a little bit of public sentiment on Arizona State. But the other part of me says situationally it might look a little bit better for Arizona State. So I don't know. I don't know how to gauge that one. UCF and Arizona. I mean, do I really want to talk about so many of these games? I don't know. Arizona, they're bouncing back, man. They just won 2 road games against ranked teams, against Cincinnati and West Virginia. We know that Arizona's good now, again, probably. I mean, they're starting to play way better. They're 3-0 in the conference now. I mean, they're not flying under the radar anymore. Now they're hosting UCF, and they do have Baylor and Texas Tech up next, and those are big games. So I think it could be a bit of a sandwich spot, actually, for Arizona, coming off beating a couple ranked opponents and having Baylor up next. There's UCF. They bounced back from that horrible loss to Kansas with a win over Colorado by 1. That's a nice win, but now they have to go out to face Arizona, and this is not a familiar venue for UCF, as Arizona's now with the Big 12. UCF was new to the Big 12 last year, 2 years ago. Now Arizona's there, too. So you have a Florida team in the same conference going to Arizona. It just looks so weird, man. You know Arizona's going to be a big favorite here because they are actually the way better team. They're up from 13 up to 16, so even though it looks like a sandwich spot, I think people are going to look at this and see UCF at 11-3 and Arizona at 9-5, and Arizona laying 17 points or whatever. It is 16 points. I think that line is just too big, and numbers-wise, I'm not sure that it is. Arizona's definitely better than the record indicates, but the spot doesn't look that great for Arizona. But then again, it's also a tough travel spot for UCF. UC Irvine, UC San Diego is going to be one of the best games on the night slate here, man. And these 2 teams are easily the top 2 teams in the Big West. UC San Diego's up from 4 to 6 now, laying points. And everybody knows UC Irvine has been kind of the class of this conference for a while now. But these teams, the odds makers are actually telling you UC San Diego is actually the better team now. UC Irvine just beat Cal State Northridge, who's sitting in 3rd place in the conference, and now it's a 2nd straight road game. So it is a bit more of a difficult spot for UC Irvine here. UC San Diego, I believe they also like to play really fast, which Cal Poly also does. They're coming up blasting Cal Poly, which, I mean, that's a game that's like kind of whatever. UC San Diego's losses are to San Diego State, which they still only lost by 5 on the road. In a game they're going to step up for against their in-city big brother. And then they lost to Seattle. UC Irvine's losses are to Duquesne pretty badly, and Oregon State, both on the road. But I think those losses are worse than San Diego's are. UC San Diego is usually not the same school as San Diego. And UC San Diego, they're coming off a much easier performance in the last game, so this sets up better for them and just staying at home. So I do lean that way, and it's going to be a good game on that college basketball slate there. And I think that may do it. Well, Pacific, I mean, they're coming off a game where they upset Washington State on the road as a 15.5 point underdog, so Pacific is probably in a bit of a letdown spot coming off of that. Oregon State, I mean, they're coming off a game where they played into overtime, though, a tough, close game against Santa Clara. Now they have a 2nd straight road game. They do have Gonzaga up next, so I can't jump in on Oregon State either. Both these teams are in bad spots. For that reason, Oregon State's sitting at a 9-point favorite, up a little bit, and 50% of tickets on them, but 97% of the cash on Oregon State. So it does look like the money's coming in on that side of it, which is fading Pacific in a letdown spot. But I do think Oregon State's kind of in a sandwich spot there as well. So that is finally the college basketball slate, as I take, an hour and a half just to do college basketball. And I had St. John's up the whole time. That's that strong of a play, man. Nate, what's up, man? Yes, I am. I am Italian, baby. All right, let's go to the hockey slate here, and hopefully I can get this done quicker. Go check out my NFL video from last night, man, because I won't really talk about any NFL again. Here, Boston is at Florida. I mean, what can you say about this? My Bruins, they're terrible. Florida's up from -180 to -195. 77% of tickets, 97% of the cash on Florida. I don't like the way the Bruins have been playing recently. And are they going to bounce back from losing badly to Tampa? I don't know. I thought that was a good spot to play the Bruins. Bad spot for Tampa, and the Bruins still didn't bounce back. Lost 6 straight games. They're playing a second straight road game here. I just don't see it. Florida isn't in a particularly bad spot here, I don't think. They just beat Utah. They are returning home, though, from Colorado and Utah. It was a short trip, but they just did still go out into elevation. So I guess it is still technically a return home spot, but whatever. This Ottawa-Pittsburgh game, this is a play for me. Let's do it. Let's get this shit done. Ottawa is a play for me at -110. I don't know what the line is going to be now, but I like Ottawa in this game. Looking at the market, Ottawa's flipped to the favorite now from +105 to -116. Line moving up on them. Well, it looks like 68% of the tickets are on them and 73% of the cash on Pittsburgh. I don't think I agree with that, where it looks like the line has flipped them to the favorite and it keeps moving up on Ottawa. So I don't think the cash is actually on the Pittsburgh side here, and I think this is a spot to fade Pittsburgh. I think this is a simple letdown spot. I mean, Pittsburgh just beat Edmonton, and yes, they broke a loss streak with that, but that was a huge win over Edmonton. Now they get Ottawa, and they do have Tampa Bay up next, which is a bigger game as well, and that's tomorrow. So they may very well overlook Ottawa here. It may be a sandwich spot for them. Ottawa, Ullmark is hurt. I don't know when he's coming back, so that is something to keep in mind. I know they've been without their best goaltender, Ullmark, but still, I think this is a spot play, and this is a play where it looks good to take Ottawa. Ottawa's lost a bunch of road games here, and can you really blame them for losing on the road to Edmonton, coming off an overtime win over Vancouver, too, and then Winnipeg, Minnesota, they actually won, Dallas, and then coming off all of that, they lost to St. Louis and Detroit as well. I mean, that was a tough road trip, and then they came home from the road trip, and that's a bad spot when you return home from a road trip like that, a long road trip. It's a distracted spot, especially if you have to go back out on the road right after that. You have to get stuff done at home, so that was a bad spot. They got completely caught by Buffalo in that one, did badly again, but now, after doing all that, if you have a return home spot and you play an ugly, bad game, that team tends to be in a bounce-back spot in the next game. If it's at home, they tend to have all their stuff done at home, and they tend to play better in the next game and refocus because they know they played really badly. But also, if they played really badly and they're going out on the road, they get to say, forget it. Forget about the home distractions again. Just go out and play hockey, focus on hockey, even though I know they have Dallas coming up next, but I think they're going to want to try to get a win here, man. They're just playing so badly. But again, losing to a lot of good teams here, and they were beating a lot of good teams before that, although, of course, that was when they had Ullmark in net, so it remains to be seen if they can continue to do that with the other guys that are filling in. But I think the spot dictates this. The line is lining Ottawa as a road favorite here in the public. To me, I don't think they're going to come in and play Ottawa laying a road favorite price here with the teams both having similar records, and Ottawa playing really ugly hockey recently, and the Penguins still being Sidney Crosby and the Penguins. So give me Ottawa in that one. That's the first hockey play I got there. All right. Vancouver-Toronto's a good game, I would say at the very least. Vancouver in the middle of a road trip, and they haven't been doing well on the road trip, but again, it is still a road trip. It's a back-to-back. It's a third game in 4 days and a fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities. So even though they are probably trying to bounce back from 3 losses, I mean, this is a very difficult travel spot here and rest spot. I mean, this is crazy. Going up from Carolina to Toronto, now having lost 2 overtime games as well, and playing Washington and Carolina, both 2 good teams. This Vancouver team, man, this is a very tough travel and rest spot, and they do have Winnipeg up next too, which is maybe a bigger game to them as well. So I don't like how that sets up, at least rest-wise, at all for Vancouver, even though you'd think they would be in a bounce-back spot, but I think it's a very tired spot. Whereas Toronto, they just lost to Carolina 2 days ago, but lost real ugly 6-3. So for them, I think they're going to be focused and be in a bounce-back spot, even though they are returning home from a road trip. It was only a 2-game road trip. So my lean in that one would be to look to the Toronto side. Toronto's up from -190 to -197. Or no, excuse me, I'm looking at Philadelphia against Anaheim. Sorry, nobody wants to get involved in that game. Toronto down from 190 to -181 actually, but 70% of the tickets and 97% of the cash on Toronto. So it does look like the money is coming in on the Toronto side there to some extent, even though the lines moved down a little bit. So that's the way that I lean in that one. Tampa and the New Jersey Devils is a big game as well. Tampa, They're coming up beating Boston, of course, which I thought was a bad spot because they'd just beaten Carolina, and they had this game against the Devils up next. I thought sandwich spot. I thought the Bruins would play well. I mean, the Bruins were in that game. I mean, they played physical. It was 2-1 late in the game, and one of those goals was shorthanded. So I don't know. Tampa now going out on the road to face New Jersey. New Jersey could be in maybe a little bit more of bounce back mode here because they did just lose in overtime to the Rangers. But then again, they're returning home from a long road trip, man. And they've been on the road since December 28th. So not really the type of spot I want to play a team, even though they may have an opponent that's going to draw their focus in Tampa Bay. But still, when you're on the road for that long and then you return home, you know you have stuff to do at home, man. You've been home for a long time. I don't even know if they came home, if they had any break there where they came home. I don't know. That's a long road trip. Very strange to see a road trip that long. So I think the spot is better for Tampa Bay in that one. New Jersey's down from -150 to -140. 52% of tickets on 98% of cash on New Jersey, but the line has moved down on New Jersey, and in such a return home spot like that. Again, like I said, I do not like it for the Devils there. And then Colorado and Winnipeg is a big game as well. I mean, these are two good teams in the Western Conference, and Winnipeg has started to play not as great, where Colorado's starting to play a lot better. But Colorado is coming off a 6-1, just absolute destruction of the Minnesota Wild, and playing a third straight road game here. But of course, it is Winnipeg, so they're still going to be focused. But they did just beat Winnipeg 5-2 at home, so they may be feeling a little bit cocky, man. They did get caught in that game against Chicago, which I liked that spot for Chicago. I played Chicago in that one. I thought it was a sandwich spot. Colorado having beaten Florida, and then having Minnesota up next. And now they crushed Minnesota, and they did just beat Winnipeg recently. So the spot might set up a little bit better for Winnipeg in this game. Winnipeg, they're coming off an overtime loss to the Kings, but that was yesterday, so they aren't a back-to-back. So I don't know if I really want to come in and play a team in a back-to-back, but I probably would still lean to Winnipeg, even though they don't have the rest. Here, Colorado, a road favorite, down from -120 to -108, though it does look weird that Colorado's laying a price on the road against a team that probably people perceive to still be the better team in Winnipeg. 81% of the tickets are on Winnipeg, so they may be public, but 99% of the cash on Winnipeg. And in hockey like this, a lot of times the public and the pros are on the same side because hockey is not a very publicly bet sport, so you see less of the public coming in on them. So I do probably agree with the Winnipeg side in that one. And then before I get to my last play, I will talk about New York and Vegas here. The Rangers coming off that nice overtime win, played 2 overtime games in a row against Dallas, losing that game, and then New Jersey in overtime. So they're in kind of a difficult spot, I think, even though I know they're facing a first game of a road trip, but you usually tend to be focused going out on the road for the first game. You want to get the road trip off on the right foot, and it is Vegas, who's a really good opponent too, but playing a third game after playing 2 straight overtime games like this against good teams, it doesn't look like the greatest spot for the Rangers in this one. Of course, we know the Rangers have been struggling pretty mightily as well. And Vegas just got embarrassed 4-0 by the New York Islanders, and they're just sitting at home waiting for the Rangers to come in. I think it's a much better spot for Vegas. I think it's a letdown / hangover spot for the Rangers, even though they are starting a road trip. I would play Vegas in this one if I was going to play it. Vegas is up from -160 to -164 with 98% of the tickets on the 59% of cash over on the other side on the Rangers. I would probably do a split bet on this, and I would lay the puck line -1.5 with Vegas to win by margin in this one. Actually, I would do that for half of the bet probably, and then put the other half on the money line, and then that way, at least if the money line part of it cashes, it'll still be a little bit of a slight win for you there. Should I add this? I haven't been good at adding late plays recently, so I guess I'll stay off it, but I do like Vegas in that one. And then my actual other play, I still have Ottawa up. I keep forgetting to take my banners down. I know I'm going back to the Calgary Flames. I know I love them when they win for me, and I hate them when they lose for me, man. I played a lot on the Calgary Flames because I just think spots set up nicely for them. This one does. LA is down from -135 to -118. 53% of tickets and 77% of the cash on LA, but I don't think I agree that cash percentage is accurate because this line is dropping on LA towards Calgary. I like Calgary at the home dog price here. I don't like how this sets up for LA. I mean, they're on a back-to-back, and I know they actually had rest before that because they were supposed to play Calgary at home. But, of course, we know what happened. They have these fires going on there. I don't know if you've heard, So that game got postponed. I don't know when it's going to be played. So they actually had a gap in there after they played Tampa Bay. And they were on a roll. They'd won 4 straight games, including against Edmonton, New Jersey, Tampa Bay. So that extra time off looked like it was going to hurt them, but it was against Winnipeg. They went out on the road. It was still a start of a road trip against a good team in Winnipeg. So they were still focused. They brought it, and they had a nice overtime win against Winnipeg. Now they're playing a back-to-back off of that, and they have to play Edmonton in 2 days, and then Vancouver. I think they might look right past Calgary, man. And this Calgary team nowhere near as good as Winnipeg, Edmonton, Vancouver. I think it's a sandwich spot. It's a back-to-back with no rest coming off an overtime. Tough win over Winnipeg. I don't like how this sets up at all for LA. And LA might even have that added distraction, like I said, with the Chargers, because I do have the Houston Texans coming up in a little while. That all the fires that are going on at home, whatever, could be a distraction in the Kings' mind, too. And maybe they'll be thinking about that a little bit if they're not totally focused on this Calgary team. It's just not really that good, even though their record is good. Calgary's not as good as their record indicates. But I like how this sets up for Calgary because they actually haven't played since then. So they're a more rested team. They played on the 7th. And then they had that break. So they won in overtime against Anaheim. So that was a bad performance from Calgary still, really, because Anaheim, pretty bad team. But Calgary was able to get the win, break their loss streak. And now I think this is not such significant rest that they're going to, become rusty or anything like that. They've only been off since Tuesday. So I think this is actually good for Calgary. I just think it gives them a little bit of extra rest, and it's a good amount of rest coming into this. So they're the way more rested team coming into this, which might be part of the reason why the line is moved in their direction, but I like it. And of course, it's the LA Kings. They're going to be focused with the Kings coming into their place before they have to go out on the road and they face Chicago, which is probably not a team that's going to draw their focus. So give me the Calgary Flames in that one, plus money. And then we'll go to NBA, where I do have an NBA play, but it's probably my least favorite play out of everything today. And I don't even know if I actually should be playing it, although the market looks to be indicating on it, so I will do it. On the NBA, there's not a whole lot to even talk about here, to be honest. Raptors and Pistons looks like it's a game I shouldn't be talking about, with the Pistons down from 6 to 4.5 as a home favorite. 92% of tickets, 99% of the cash. I mean, crazy world where the public is coming in that heavily on the Detroit Pistons. But the Pistons have been a fairly competitive basketball team this year, and we know Toronto has not really, but Toronto's been one of the worst teams. But Detroit, they're coming off losing a nice win streak and losing it to Golden State, and that was a tough game. And you know you're going to step up when you play Golden State. Coming off of that, kind of a difficult spot, having lost a win streak, could be a little bit hungover after a tough loss like that coming into this game against Toronto. They do have the New York Knicks up next, but then you go over and you look at the Toronto side, and what did Toronto just do? Yeah, they just went into Cleveland on a second straight road game, and they played Cleveland to within 6. And we know Cleveland was off that huge win over Oklahoma City. So Cleveland really, I don't think, showed up in that game against Toronto. And Toronto played them to within 6 points. And this was a close game the whole way. Toronto was winning this game outright in the second half. So there's no way I would want to come in and play Toronto. I think both teams are in fade spots here. And Toronto does have Golden State, Boston up next, and they might be looking ahead to that. It's a third straight road game in 4 days to them, a fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities. So I think the spot is actually worse for the Raptors. So I would look to the Pistons in this game, but it's not a great spot for the Pistons either. So I won't play it. Probably the only good game today. Well, maybe Houston-Atlanta is good. Well, should I talk about it? Yeah, I guess, whatever. I'll do it quickly. Houston, I mean, for some reason they had a game postponed at Atlanta. I don't know what that was. Oh, that's today's game. It's postponed. What the hell? What happened? Well, all right. We can go figure that out, but I guess I don't have to handicap this game now, right? Because that game got postponed, so I don't know what the deal is there, but it looks like Rockets-Hawks is postponed, and I have no clue why. Was there another terrorist attack? Are there fires in Atlanta? I don't know. I'm going to get off the stream and go look, or if you guys know what the deal is, you can let me know in the comments there. I don't know what's going on with that. But it's less for me to handicap today, so all right, fuck it. Memphis, Minnesota is the best game on the slate here. Memphis, I mean, they're coming off that game where I believe that was John Morant's return to action, so it was a reverse injured player theory spot from Memphis there with Morant coming back. You got to think they have to get him back, work him back in, and there might be a little bit of chemistry issues, and Memphis was coming up beating Dallas, which is a huge win, even though Dallas is without Luka. That's still a big win when you beat the team that won the conference last year. So it wasn't the greatest spot, Memphis at home against Houston, and Houston came in and beat them and took care of business. Nice win for Houston there. So Memphis maybe could be in a bounce back spot because that was the first game with Morant back, and a lot of times if you lose that game, you tend to be more focused in the next game. They're getting to go out on the road and kind of forget about that. So it's a good spot when you're starting a road trip as well. You do tend to be focused. So some positives from Memphis here, even though that was a tough game still against Houston. So they are still coming off a tough game. Minnesota, they're coming off a nice win as well at Orlando. And this is a game where I said you got to look at Orlando and see who's going to be playing in these games. Because Orlando, by the way, I believe they actually got Banchero back last night. So that was actually the reverse injured player spot from the Magic last night. And they lost but still covered against Milwaukee. So at least I did not fade them in that one. So Banchero is back for the Magic, just so we know about that moving forward. Timberwolves did beat Orlando in this game. But again, is Minnesota really going to put that much stock into beating an Orlando team that's extremely injury depleted? But again, it also makes Minnesota look a little bit better than they actually are, and they are returning home from a road trip, even though it was only a 2-game road trip. It is still a road trip return, but I do think they'll still be focused on Memphis here. So this is a tough spot, man. I think both teams, tough to gauge, I think both teams are going to be focused here. T-Wolves down from 3 to 1.5. 69% of tickets and 85% of cash on the T-Wolves. I don't even know if I would give a lean in this one, man. I don't know what to think about this game, and the market has conflicting indicators as well. So it is a good game. The total is up from 227.5 to 231.5. So if you think both teams are kind of in bad spots, which may be the case, the over might kind of make sense in a game like that. But again, the over, it has gone up a bit. So you're losing some value on the over in that one. And then my actual play before I leave here. Huevos Bancheros. Yeah, that's right. That's my favorite breakfast meal, man. Favorite breakfast dish. Miami Heat is my only NBA play today. I was going to have none, and then I decided I will play this one on the Miami Heat. This game, what do I even think about this game? Well, I think it's a bad spot for Portland. That's really why I'm doing it. Portland is returning home from a road trip, and I like to look to fade teams returning home from road trips. They've been on the road for over a week since January 2nd, so when teams return from road trips, like I say, it's a distracted spot a lot of times. These guys have to return to home, get some stuff out of the way at home, family life. And Portland has had a packed schedule, too. They're playing a 3rd game in 4 days, 4th game in 6 days, 5th game in 8 days, all in different cities, and actually a 6th game in 10 days, all in different cities. So this is not a good rest spot at all. This Portland team is going to be not well rested coming into this. And they just had a tough game against Dallas, even though I know it was without Luka. When you go in and you play Dallas on the road, and Dallas is the returning conference champs, and Portland was winning this game almost the whole time and just faded at the end after they're winning by 7 with 4 minutes left. They totally stalled out and didn't score at all for the next almost the entirety of the rest of the game until they finally scored one more time. That is a tough way to lose that game, and they still covered as a 7.5-point underdog, losing by 6 at Dallas. And that is a tough game to be coming off of, tough spot. So you're returning home from a road trip on that. Whereas Miami, yeah, I know they're facing a 3rd straight road game here or whatever it is, 4th actually. And they did have that game where they blew it for me in overtime against that revamped Sacramento team with a new coach there. Miami completely imploded. I thought that was a great spot to play Miami, and they blew almost like a 20-point lead very late in the game. Double overtime. I don't know how they lost that game. Then they turned around in a back-to-back, and they blew out Golden State. Although I assume Golden State probably didn't have their full complement of players there, I would imagine. I don't know if they did or if they didn't. Golden State's had a lot of injuries. They've had Curry hasn't played a lot of some of these games. Actually, Curry, Wiggins, and Green all played in that game. So my mistake. So that's crazy that Miami was able to do that. And Miami, remember, is without Butler because he's still suspended. And then off of that game, Miami did have a bit of a bad spot, a 3rd straight road game in 4 days, going into elevation into Utah. And this is the spot where they kind of got caught. They wound up not covering by a 0.5 point in this one. Utah played pretty well in this game against Miami. It was a close game. Miami didn't have a great game in this one. So I think it could be a little bit of a bounce back spot for Miami and return to form, even though I know that they are facing a 4th straight road game, but their schedule's actually been a little bit less packed than Portland's has, because at the very least, Miami did have a day off before that Utah game. So they are only playing 3 games in the last 5 days. Well, and it is still 4 games in the last 6 days though, so still a little bit difficult. But I don't know, man. I think it sets up better for Miami in this one. It is a lot of this is a fade of Portland, and a lot of times in basketball, a lot of times it makes sense to lay the price with the better team on the road. If the inferior team, a bad team, is also in a bad spot, that compounds their badness, and that might happen here with the Portland Trailblazers here, as they're not a good team. They're in a very bad spot, so the better team, even though they're not in the greatest spot, may win out in this one. And of course, like I said, Butler's still not there, so there's not a whole lot that you can really look into as far as that's concerned. We know he's gone. I mean, this Miami team is used to playing without him at this point. Miami's sitting at a 4-point favorite with 75% of the tickets on them, because the public, of course, is not going to want to play the Blazers either, but 95% of the cash on the Heat. It does look like the line has moved up, and it's come in on Miami. I was able to play them at -3, and that's it, man. That's going to do it for me. A 2-hour video Saturday. Packed college basketball. Tons of info there. Packed hockey. Let's go get some wins, man. College basketball plays one more time are Cornell, Pick'em, Cincinnati +1, Texas Tech -1.5, Arkansas +4.5, Austin Peay +1, St. John's -6.5. I don't have any 12 noon games, though, so at least we'll be able to get these out. NHL Ottawa -110, Calgary +115, NBA Miami Heat -3, and that is it. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. I'm Tower Gang Toad, of course. Follow me on Twitter, patreon.com/Tower Gang to support the best and most offensive podcast that you'll ever see. Most hilarious as well. Give us some support, baby. And that's going to do it once again. Patreon.com/Tower Gang. Tower Gang Toad. I am Tower Gang, and let's have a good one, man. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Until next time. And I forgot to mention, I do have one more play today. The Houston Texans +3. My apologies, man. I forgot NFL is still today. You can go look at, go watch my NFL video from last night where I broke this down. I do think the Chargers are a public road favorite here. They're at 68%, 67% of the cash still. So go watch my video for my analysis on that one. And that's going to do it, man. So Houston Texans as well. So I have whatever it is, 9 or 10 plays today. Let's do it. Let's get it done. Peace out, guys.